Part 59. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 581. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her standing at the door of the study, but she was reluctant to go in. He asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Shen Chuwei tiptoed close to his ear and whispered, "I'm a little nervous." Xiao Jinyan found it a little funny and said in the same voice, "Why are you nervous? You are never afraid of the national master." Shen Chuwei knew that Xiao Jinyan insisted on treating her as the real Xiaju. The real Xiaju might not be afraid of her father, but she was a fake and was very scared. But now she was not afraid of this. "I'm afraid that the national master will embarrass you. There is a saying that the more the mother-in-law looks at her son-in-law, the more she likes him, and the more the father-in-law looks at his son-in-law, the more picky he is." Xiao Jinyan suddenly realized, and then nodded seriously, "Really? Then I will try my best." Shen Chuwei. "You nodded." Just then, the tightly closed door suddenly opened from the inside, scaring Shen Chuwei. "No way, no way," talking so quietly, the national master heard it. After the door opened, Shen Chuwei found that there was no one at the door. She looked inside and saw that the master of the state was sitting in front of the desk. She and Xiao Jinyan looked at each other. The master of the state was so powerful. The door was open, so it was not good to whisper. Shen Chuwei calmed down her nervousness and subconsciously pulled Xiao Jinyan's sleeve and walked in. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and glanced at Xiaoju's behavior. He found that she always liked to pull his sleeve. Shen Chuwei and Xiao Jinyan stood side by side in front of the desk. She swallowed her saliva secretly and shouted for the first time, "Dad, he's here." Jun Mocking paused in writing and slowly raised his head to look at Xiaoju in front of him. The voice of Dad was familiar and a little strange. Maybe it was because he had grown up, and his voice was not as sweet and sticky as when he was a child. Xiao Jinyan was born in an imperial family, and he paid the most attention to etiquette. But at this moment, he was not as calm and composed as he seemed. After all, he was meeting his father-in-law, and he was still a little nervous. He stepped forward to greet him, "Master, Imperial Master." Jun Mocking then turned his gaze to the man beside Xiaoju. He felt familiar with him at a glance. He looked like Xiao Jinyan, the Prince of De Xia. Xiaoju also loved to play with him when she was a child. Shen Chuwei saw that Master Imperial Master was looking at Xiao Jinyan, and she smiled and introduced him, "Dad, he is Xiao Jinyan, you should know him." Jun Mocking looked at Xiaoju with cold eyes, "The sweetheart you are talking about is him." Shen Chuwei nodded embarrassedly, "Yes, didn't you ask me to bring him to see you? I brought him." Jun Mocking looked at Xiao Jinyan again. He hadn't seen him for several years. His facial features were more delicate and three-dimensional than before, and he was much calmer than before. "How did you trick Xiaoju into getting him?" Shen Chuwei said coquettishly, "Dad, what did you say? Am I so easy to fool?" Jun Mocking put down the pen in his hand and looked up at Xiaoju. As a face control, it is inevitable that he will be deceived. No matter how smart a person is, there will be a time when he is blinded by a leaf. Xiao Jinyan knew that the national master loved his daughter and was eager to protect her, so it was normal for him to have doubts. "National master, Xiaoju and I are in love with each other and treat each other sincerely. There is no deception." Shen Chuwei secretly glanced at Xiao Jinyan, and didn't know whether the Xiaoju he was talking about was Fengwu or Shen Chuwei. It was so annoying. Jun Mocking ignored Xiao Jinyan's words. Whether they were in love with each other and whether they were sincere remained to be investigated. "Is Xiaoju's disappearance related to you?" Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, "Junior doesn't know." Jun Mocking asked again, "Then how could Xiaoju be with you after she disappeared?" This, Xiao Jinyan couldn't answer for a while, because he didn't remember. Shen Shuwei looked at the national master. He said that he would not embarrass Xiao Jinyan. Now he asked questions left and right. What else could he do if it wasn't embarrassment? She stepped forward and explained, "Dad, he has lost his memory and doesn't remember many things." Jun Mocking looked at his daughter's anxious face, which was exactly the same as when she was a child, and loved to say good things for Xiao Jinyan. Amnesia? When did you remember? Shen Shuwei felt that there was a play when she heard it. She took another step forward and told Xiao Jinyan about his indirect amnesia with a serious face. He just didn't remember the things of Nanzhao Kingdom before. Later, when he led the troops to the battle and encountered an assassin, he forgot all his memories. Then he occasionally remembered the things of Nanzhao Kingdom, just like now, he only remembers the things of Nanzhao Kingdom. Jun Mocking looked up at Xiao Jinyan after hearing it, thinking. Xiao Jinyan felt under great pressure when being stared at by the national teacher. Master Imperial Master, I really only remember the things about Nanzhao Kingdom. I heard from Xiaju that I have no memory after returning to Daxia, and I don't remember how I met her. Everything I said is true, and I dare not deceive Master Imperial Master. Jun Mocking, I wouldn't dare to do that even if I gave you the courage. Shen Shuwei moved 2 steps towards Jun Mocking, grabbed his sleeves with 2 small hands, and called him affectionately, Dad. Jun Mocking glanced at the 2 small hands on his sleeves with his cold eyes, and then looked up at its owner. Do you want to ask me for something? Shen Shuwei. Master Imperial Master is so awesome, he saw through her thoughts at a glance. Do you have a way to help him recover his memory? Jun Mocking looked at Xiaoju calmly, why should I help him and waste my time? Shen Shuwei said shamelessly, he is your future son-in-law, based on this, do you think you should help him? Jun Mocking glanced at Xiao Jinyan, are you sure you want to marry him? Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, she and Xiao Jinyan are already married. Of course, didn't you say you want to see what I mean? You are so open-minded, you shouldn't be able to beat a mandarin duck, right? Jun Mocking, that's not possible. Shen Shuwei tugged on the sleeve of the Imperial Master and looked at him expectantly, then will you help? Jun Mocking said, I won't waste time and energy on irrelevant people. How do I know that he treats you sincerely? Shen Chu said softly, I know best whether you are sincere or not. Jun Mocking looked at her, huh. Shen Chu coughed slightly and whispered a few words into the ear of the Imperial Master. Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaoju in confusion, not knowing what she and the Imperial Master were talking about. After Shen Shuwei finished speaking, Jun Mocking said, how do you know he's not drawing cakes for you? Shen Shuwei. The Imperial Master actually knows how to draw cakes? So avant-garde. There is a saying that you have to finish the road you choose on your knees. Although I won't walk on my knees, I will definitely get to the end. It's just that the things I encounter and the methods are different. Jun Mocking. Shen Shuwei asked seriously, do you understand? Jun Mocking naturally understood. She always thought that her daughter looked like her, but now it seems that she is half and half. 2 days later. When Shen Shuwei heard this, she almost jumped up with joy. Seeing the cold and paralyzed look on the master's face, she held it back. She turned around and pulled Xiao Jinyan's sleeve, you will be able to regain your memory in 2 days. Xiao Jinyan was also very happy. He eagerly wanted to know what happened after leaving Nanzhao Kingdom. He saluted Jun Mocking, thank you, Master, for your help. I do it for Xiaju's sake. What Jun Mocking meant was that if it weren't for Xiaju, I wouldn't have the time. Shen Chu gritted her teeth and took out a piece of shortbread from her sleeve pocket. When she ate just now, she specially kept a piece and wrapped it in oil paper. In order to thank the Imperial Master, she had no choice but to contribute it. She opened the oil paper package, handed the shortbread to the Imperial Master with both hands, and called out sweetly, Dad, please eat a piece of shortbread. Jun mocking looked at the shortbread in front of him and said, I have nothing to do to show my courtesy. Shen Shuwei responded shamelessly, my daughter just wants to honor you. Jun mocking shook her head helplessly, took the shortbread from her hand, put it to her mouth and took a bite. When Shen Shuwei saw the imperial master eating, he asked, Dad, is there no problem in letting him live in Wu Palace? Jun mocking said, you have already spoken, if I don't agree. Shen Shuwei didn't wait for him to finish speaking, and said with a smile, you're the best. Jun mocking, arrange a guest room for him. Okay, let's leave first. Shen Shu waved slightly, pulled Xiao Jinyan and walked out. Jun mocking watched her daughter leave happily, looking down at the shortbread in her hand, she suddenly lost the smell. The Palace of Worry is very large and has many guest rooms. Shen Shuwei arranged for Xiao Jinyan to stay in a guest room not far or near from her, and let the little palace maid clean up the room first. Shen Shuwei thought that Xiao Jinyan would be able to recover his memory in 2 days, and the stone in his heart fell to the ground. It went more smoothly than I thought. I probably took Feng Wu's identity. If the Imperial Master finds out that I'm fake, it will be over. Xiao Jinyan saw that she still didn't believe that he was Xiaoju, and felt helpless. The Imperial Master is not that easy to fool. If you are fake, the Imperial Master will be able to tell at a glance. Didn't you hear what the Imperial Preceptor said just now? Shen Chu cleared his throat slightly and imitated the Imperial Preceptor's tone and said, no matter how smart a person is, there are times when a leaf blinds his vision. Xiao Jinyan smiled and said, don't you know what the Imperial Master is capable of? Shen Shuwei asked, what ability? Xiao Jinyan said, you can pinch and calculate. Shen Chu patted his forehead slightly, how could I forget that the National Master is so powerful, so does he know that I am a fake? Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei guessed again, then his daughter hasn't come back yet, and he misses her again. Plus, Feng Wu and I look similar, so that's why we didn't expose him. Xiao Jinyan, you really know how to imagine. Asterisk. Yes, Suhan, who had been recuperating for 3 days, could finally get out of bed and walk around. During these 3 days, he had been looking forward to Xiaoju coming to see her, but every day ended in disappointment. Also, if Xiaoju hates him so much now, how could he come to see him? When he came out of the dormitory, the afternoon sun was particularly bright. Yesuhan asked someone to prepare a sedan chair. After arriving at Wu Palace, Yesuhan first went to the Imperial Master to pay his respects. He went straight to the study, knocked on the door, waited for a while, and then opened the door and went in. Seeing Jun mocking in front of the writing desk, he stepped forward to greet him, disciple, please pay your respects to master. Jun mocking was drinking tea and asked quietly, why do you want to learn hypnosis? Yesuhan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, my disciple accidentally saw the effect of hypnosis and became interested in it, so he couldn't help but teach himself. Jun mocking raised his eyes and looked at Yesuhan, you are indeed talented in martial arts, but there are some things you cannot and should not learn. Yesuhan lowered his head, disciple realizes his mistake. Jun mocking waved his sleeves and motioned for him to get down. Disciple, please leave. After Yesuhan exited, he went straight to the side hall. When he stepped into the side hall, he paused when he saw 2 figures in the corridor. Shen Chu smiled and said, I plan to cook in person to reward the Imperial Master. Do you have anything you want to eat for dinner? Xiao Jinyan said, I will eat whatever you cook. Shen Shuwei wiped his chin and nodded, that's right, I know what you like to eat, I will make you 2 dishes you like. Seeing this scene, Yesuhan was jealous and crazy. How could Xiao Jinyan appear in Wu Palace? It's daytime now. What is Xiao Jinyan doing here? Did the master know it too? If he hadn't promised Xiaoju, he would have been unable to resist attacking Xiao Jinyan. Yesuhan's hands hanging by his side clenched into fists, his eyes fixed on the two figures, he pursed his lips tightly, turned around and left. At this time, Yaenyu waited for a long time in the prince's bedroom before the prince brother came back. "Prince brother, I have something important to tell you." Yuxi had just returned from outside the palace, holding the stinky tofu he had just bought. "What's the matter? Why are you so flustered?" Yasuhan smelled a bad smell and covered his nose and said, "Brother, what is so smelly?" Yuxi looked down at the oil paper bag in his hand and said with a smile, "I just bought stinky tofu and was planning to give it to Xiaju to try." Yaenyu was furious when she heard this. "Brother Crown Prince, Fengwu in Wu Palace is fake, don't do useless work." Yuxi frowned, "What nonsense are you talking about? I followed her to the inn today and heard it with my own ears. The counterfeit is a fake. I was wondering how Fengwu, who had been missing for so long, could suddenly appear for no reason. It turned out to be a fake," Yaenyu said angrily. Yaenyu asked uncertainly, "Really? Xiaju is fake? How to explain the tiger lion beast?" Yaenyu said, "Maybe she has this ability, so she can get away with it." Yuxi frowned. His sister would naturally not lie to her. If Xiaju is fake, then it doesn't matter who is the crown princess. Yaenyu said, "Crown Prince, let's expose her. I have disliked her for a long time." Yuxi thought about it and said, "It's not appropriate now. If we don't expose her now, when will we wait? I can't wait to let everyone know that she is fake, and see how she can enjoy these honors that don't belong to her by relying on the identity of Princess Juyu." Yaenyu took the hand of the crown prince and continued, "Let's tell the national master. The national master hates others lying to him the most." Yuxi thought for a long time, and finally followed his sister to Wu Palace. June Mocking smelled the fragrance of food in the study. He put down the book in his hand, stood up and walked out, and saw the crown prince and the princess walking towards the side. Yuxi and Yaenyu stepped forward to greet him, "Master, Imperial Master." June Mocking coldly spat out two words, "What's up?" "Master, Imperial Master, I have something important to tell you." Before Yaenyu finished her words, she was interrupted by June Mocking coldly, "Speak to the point." Yaenyu has been afraid of the Imperial Master since she was a child. The cold voice made her back feel cold unconsciously, and she dared not say another word. Fengwu in Wu Palace is a fake. Good night. The memory will be restored in the next chapter. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 582. June Mocking's eyes turned cold. "What did you say?" Yaenyu repeated it again, "Master, Imperial Master, the current Princess Juyu is fake. I heard it with my own ears at the inn. If you don't believe me, ask her face to face." June Mocking glanced at the prince and princess, his eyes full of disgust. "You came here in such a hurry just to tell me this?" Yaenyu nodded vigorously, "Yes, Master, Imperial Master, I don't want to see that liar continue to deceive Master, Imperial Master, so I came here specifically to tell Master, Imperial Master." June Mocking said, "I know better than you whether Xiaju is my daughter. Do you need you to tell me?" Yaenyu didn't react for a while, because the national master's reaction was a little different from what she expected. Shouldn't she be angry? She asked again uncertainly, "Master, National Preceptor already knows that Princess Juyu is fake." June Mocking said in a deep voice, "Who can pretend to be my daughter? Do you think anyone has the same vision as you?" Yaenyu was so frightened that her legs were weak, but she was unwilling to give up. The Imperial Master must not know that it was a fake. She held on and said, "I'm just worried that the National Preceptor will be deceived by the villain, and I heard it with my own ears, so it can't be wrong. The National Preceptor can go and ask first." There was already impatience in June Mocking's eyes. "Are you questioning my ability to discern? You don't even know your own daughter." Yaenyu shook her head quickly in fear. "No, No, that's not what I meant. The Imperial Master is wise and powerful, but he is afraid that villains will have many tricks, making it difficult for people to guard against. After Shen Shuwei finished cooking dinner, he happily came to call the Imperial Master to come and have dinner, and saw Ye Yuxi and Ye Enyu were there. She came over with doubts and said with a smile, "Dad, dinner is ready." When Ye Enyu saw Feng Guiu coming, she didn't believe that her false identity could not be revealed. "Master National Preceptor, you can confront me face to face." She then pointed at Feng Guiu and said, "I heard what you said today. You are not the real Feng Guiu. You said it yourself that you and Feng Guiu will never be the same person." Shen Chu blinked his beautiful big eyes twice. It turned out that Ye Enyu heard what she said today, and even ran to the Imperial Master to pick her up. She secretly glanced at the Imperial Master. There was no expression on his beautiful and cold face. Believe it or not. Is she doomed? When Ye Enyu saw that she didn't say a word, she knew that she was guilty. "Let's see how you can quibble this time. Why don't you speak? Are you feeling guilty?" Shen Shuwei ignored Ye Enyu, but looked at the Imperial Master. "Dad, do you need to shed blood to recognize your kin?" Jun Mocking looked at Xiaju. "What do you think?" Shen Chu smiled and said, "You make the decision." Jun Mocking said, "I can't even recognize my own daughter." Shen Chu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the Imperial Master had a strong sense of independence. If it were someone else, he would have taken the provocation seriously. Ye Enyu didn't expect that the Imperial Master would believe a fake person so easily. She still said unwillingly, "Master Imperial Master, don't be deceived by her. She is really a fake." Jun Mocking uttered 3 words coldly, "Get out." Ye Enyu trembled with fright. Ye Yuxi has been watching from the side. The master of the country obviously does not believe what his sister said. He glanced at Xiaju. Is she true or false? But the most important thing now is to take my sister away. He stepped forward and bowed, "Master Imperial Master, and you has an upright temperament and said the wrong thing. Master Imperial Master, please don't be offended." Jun Mocking looked at Ye Yuxi coldly. "You are the prince, and you allow your sister to talk nonsense and slander Xiaju without stopping. Your ability as a prince is worrying." Ye Yuxi hurriedly lowered his head and said, "What the Imperial Master taught me is that the younger generation must obey his teachings." Jun Mocking ignored Ye Yuxi and glanced at Ye Enyu again, apologized to Xiaju. She was still very scared to face Grand Master Ye Enyu, but she couldn't do it if she was asked to admit her mistake to an impostor. Why does a fake enjoy better than she, a real princess? The Imperial Master is also stupid, and he can't even recognize the impostor. Ye Yuxi raised his head and looked at Ye Enyu, and said sternly, "Enyu, apologize." Ye Enyu raised her head and glanced at the prince's brother. Seeing the reproach in his eyes, she pursed her lips and looked at Feng Guiu with still unwillingness. "Princess Juyu, it was my fault. I came here and talked nonsense before I understood it clearly. I hope you won't be offended." Shen Chu cleared his throat slightly. "For the Emperor's sake, let's forget it this time. If there is a next time, I won't let you go so easily." Ye Enyu lowered her head and held onto the hem of her clothes with both hands. It was obviously a fake, so what's so great about it? You are just relying on the power of the National Preceptor. Without the National Preceptor, you are nothing. Ye Yuxi knew that her sister had offended the National Master and Xiaju. It was easy to offend anyone, but the people of Wuyu Palace could not be offended. "Master Imperial Master, juniors please leave." After he finished speaking, he took Ye Enyu and walked out. Ye Enyu left with the prince's brother unwillingly. After walking far away, Ye Enyu said angrily, "Brother Prince, I really didn't lie. That Xiaju is a fake." Ye Yuxi said displeasedly, "Do you have any evidence? The Imperial Preceptor is so powerful, How could he not be able to tell the truth from the false? If you weren't reckless, how could you offend the imperial preceptor? Yaenyu raised her hand unwillingly and said seriously, Brother Crown Prince, I can raise my hand and swear that I really heard her say that she is not Fengwu. Yayuxi angrily scolded, enough, this matter ends here, don't make trouble anymore. Brother Crown Prince, I am telling the truth, why don't you believe me? Yaenyu was very aggrieved. It's useless to say that if the state master believes that she is real, understand. After saying this, Yayuxi left without looking back. Yaenyu watched the crown prince leave her and leave directly. She clenched the handkerchief in her hand and turned her head to look at Wu Palace. She didn't believe that there was no way to cure a fake. She retracted her gaze and looked at the figure that had gone far away, and ran to catch up. Asterisk. After Shen Shuwei watched Yayuxi and Yaenyu leave, she had the illusion of surviving a disaster. If the state master believed them, then she would be finished. She looked at the imperial master and found that he was looking at her. Perhaps because she felt guilty, she did not dare to meet those extremely beautiful eyes. June mocking said, let's have dinner together. Shen Shuwei nodded, okay. When Shen Shuwei and June mocking arrived at the restaurant, the food was already on the table, and Xiao Jinyan was standing at the door waiting. When he saw someone coming, he stepped forward to salute. Imperial Master. June mocking glanced at Xiao Jinyan and stepped into the restaurant. When Shen Shuwei passed by Xiao Jinyan, she poked the back of his hand with her hand. The two looked at each other and walked in tacitly. Because the Imperial Master promised to help restore Xiao Jinyan's memory, Shen Shuwei specially made a few more specialties, but most of them were her favorites. Because every time they had a meal, the dishes that the Imperial Master picked up were made by her. On the contrary, he didn't pick up any food from the Imperial kitchen with chopsticks, and his accuracy was so impressive that it made people admire him. June mocking glanced at the dishes in front of him. There were 8 dishes and 1 soup, both meat and vegetables. He looked up at Xiaoju, tonight's meal is very rich. Shen Shuwei glanced at Xiao Jinyan and said with a smile, Dad is worried about his daughter's affairs, so I prepared a few more dishes to honor you. I don't know if it suits your taste. At the end, he did not forget to be humble. June mocking glanced at Xiao Jinyan and always felt that his daughter did not prepare these meals for him. Xiao Jinyan felt the gaze from the national master and felt a lot of pressure. June mocking retracted his gaze and looked at Xiaoju. He saw her eyebrows curved, and felt that this table of dishes should be prepared for him, not an outsider. The national master hesitated to move his chopsticks. Shen Shuwei and Xiao Jinyan looked at each other and felt an extremely huge pressure. June mocking picked up the chopsticks and reached into the soup bowl, picked up a piece of fish fillet and put it into his mouth. The meat was tender, a little sour, and more spicy, but the spiciness was just right. After seeing the Imperial Master eating, Shen Shuwei asked, Dad, this is pickled fish, do you like it? June mocking praised, it tastes good. Shen Shuwei happily retracted her gaze, picked up a piece and put it in the bowl in front of Xiao Jinyan, try it too, I deliberately put less spicy. Xiao Jinyan nodded, yeah. When he picked up the chopsticks to pick up the fish slices in the bowl, he just put it to his mouth and noticed the cold eyes of the opposite side. It was not right to eat it, and it was not right not to eat it. June mocking looked coldly at the fish slices picked by Xiao Jinyan. In the end, Xiao Jinyan pretended not to notice the Imperial Master's gaze, and bit the bullet and put the fish slices into his mouth, causing him to not even taste the fish. Shen Shuwei did not notice the dissatisfied eyes of the opposite side and the difficulty of eating. She picked up several pieces of fish slices and put them in the bowl, and ate them without hesitation. Today, she asked the little palace maid to see what ingredients were in the imperial kitchen. She is now the princess of Juyu, unlike when she first came to Daxia, she can't get anything she wants. When she heard about blackfish, she thought of pickled fish. I haven't eaten pickled fish for a long time, I'm craving it. For dinner, Shen Shuwei ate 4 bowls of rice before she put down her bowl and chopsticks in satisfaction. On the other hand, Xiao Jinyan didn't dare to taste anything during the meal, as he always felt that the imperial master was staring at him. Especially when Xiaju picked up food for him, the cold eyes were even more obvious. Jun Mocking finished his meal without waiting for his daughter to pick up food for him. Sure enough, he forgot his father when he had a sweetheart. Shen Shuwei wiped the corners of her mouth and looked at the imperial master with a smile. "Dad, are you happy?" Jun Mocking, "It's okay." The smile on Shen Shuwei's mouth froze for a moment. "It's okay? Is the food not to her taste?" She glanced at the leftovers in front of her in confusion. She ate a lot. After dinner, Jun Mocking stared at the 2 people in front of him for a long time before leaving, which made Shen Shuwei and Xiao Jinyan feel guilty. They always felt that the next second, the national master would hold a sword and stand between them. Fortunately, the national master looked for a while and then turned and left. Shen Shuwei let out a long sigh. She watched the figure of the national master walk into the main hall. She took Xiao Jinyan's hand and whispered, "It was almost exposed today." Xiao Jinyan also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He always felt pressure in front of the national master. "What's wrong?" Shen Shuwei said, "Enya came to pick me up again today because she overheard what I said." Xiao Jinyan's eyes flashed with disgust. "I knew she had bad intentions." He asked again, "What was the result?" Shen Shuwei said with a look of relief, "Fortunately, the national master didn't believe her, otherwise I would be finished." Xiao Jinyan said, "I think the national master's vision is correct." Shen Shuwei shrugged helplessly, "It's a pity that it's not." Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but ask again, "Why don't you believe in the eyesight of the national teacher?" Shen Shuwei blinked her beautiful big eyes twice, looked around, and pulled Xiao Jinyan to a quiet place. Xiao Jinyan looked at her sneaky behavior, but still followed her until she stopped. "Are you going to tell me some important secrets?" because she would be so cautious only when telling important secrets. Shen Shuwei said, "I have a secret to tell you, but I don't want to tell you because you may not believe it." Xiao Jinyan became interested when he heard it. "How do you know if I believe it if you don't tell me?" Shen Shuwei touched his chin and stared at Xiao Jinyan. "Do you believe that there are souls in this world?" Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a moment, then shook his head. "I have never seen it, I don't believe it." Shen Shuwei nodded. "Actually, I don't believe it either." Xiao Jinyan asked, "Then what secret do you want to tell me?" "Let's wait until you recover your memory." Shen Shuwei looked up at Xiao Jinyan in front of her. It has been almost 5 years since she came here, and she has been married to Xiao Jinyan for 4 years. Xiao Jinyan didn't understand. "Why not tell it now?" Shen Shuwei spread her hands. "Who told you to forget me?" Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei stood on tiptoe and stretched out her arms to hug his neck. The height difference was too big, and even on tiptoe, it was still a bit difficult. The sudden hug made Xiao Jinyan stunned for a moment. In his only memory now, except for the intimate contact of kissing in the Xin Miao tribe, there is no memory of husband and wife. Therefore, intimate actions are indeed a little uncomfortable for him. However, being uncomfortable does not mean that he will not react. When he hugged Xiaju, he thought of her childhood. At that time, she was so short. Shen Shuwei kissed him on the lips. "Okay, it's late, let's rest early." Xiao Jinyan stared at her for a long time before nodding, "Okay." 2 days later, it was also the day that Shen Shuwei and Xiao Jinyan had been looking forward to, and they were also very nervous. Shen Shuwei saw with her own eyes that the national teacher took Xiao Jinyan into the study and closed the door. Why couldn't she go in? Shen Shuwei lay on the carved wooden door and looked inside desperately, but she couldn't see anything. A familiar voice suddenly came from behind, Princess Juyo, I suggest you poke a hole with your finger. Yes, people in ancient times used to peep like this. Thank you. Shen Shuwei imitated what he saw on TV, put his finger into his mouth, poked a hole in the window paper, and looked through it, but he couldn't even see a person. Originally, this chapter was about restoring memory, but as I was writing, I exceeded the word count. Highly recommend the new book, Sweet Pet, Different Male Protagonist Personality, Doting on His Wife with Hands Instead of Words, Action-Oriented. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 583. Is it blocked by the screen? Shen Chu thought for a while, then suddenly turned around and saw Xuehui standing behind her. Seeing his paralyzed face, she thought that it must be the reason why he came into contact with the Imperial Master every day. No one in sight. Xuehui pointed to the roof expressionlessly, then I can only suggest that we go up to the roof. Shen Chu slightly raised his head and took a look. The first floor of ancient houses was much higher than the first floor of modern houses. She looked embarrassed and said, I can't go up. Xuehui asked again, want to help? Shen Chu waved his hand slightly, forget it, I'll just wait outside. Okay, Xuehui responded and stepped back. Shen Chuwei asked the little eunuch to bring a small stool. She sat on it and took out the shortbread from her sleeve pocket, intending to eat it while waiting. Xuehui came over with tea and snacks and placed them in front of her. Shen Chuwei ate a piece of shortbread and felt thirsty. She picked up the teacup and opened the lid, blew on it and took 2 sips. She looked at Xuehui with a smile, you should be careful. Xuehui said, Princess Juyu better not wait here, she won't be able to come out for a while. Shen Chu took a bite of the shortbread and asked doubtfully, how do you know? Xuehui explained, if it can be solved in a short time, the master does not need to close the door. Shen Chuwei suddenly realized after hearing this, that's right, no wonder they have to close the door for treatment. She looked at the exquisite and delicious pastries in front of her and said with a smile, let's talk after eating these. Okay, Xuehui retreated again. Shen Chuwei ate 2 pieces of shortbread, 3 pieces of osmanthus cake, 4 pieces of jujube cake. After finishing the tea, he continued to drink it, and then drank it again. The closed study door still showed no intention of opening. She looked at the empty plate, did I eat too fast? That's why they haven't come out yet. She clapped her hands, stood up and looked back again, then walked out of the main hall. As soon as I came out, I saw a thin figure standing under the steps, and the silver mask was the most eye-catching. Shen Chu was stunned for a moment. After not seeing him for several days, he seemed to have lost weight again, and the clothes around his waist were a little empty. Yesuhan raised his head and looked at Shen Chuwei under the corridor, and called out in a low voice, Xiaju. Shen Chuwei walked down the steps and looked up at Yesuhan, why are you here? Yesuhan asked, what? I can't come to see you. Shen Chuwei wanted to say that they were not familiar with each other, but her current identity was Feng Wu, and she was the daughter of the Imperial Master, and Yesuhan was the apprentice of the Imperial Master. She knew from the bottom of her head that the relationship between the two should be good. I'm standing here, look. Shen Chuwei stood there openly, and then reminded him seriously, you can only look at it 3 times, and you can only do 3 things. I still have important things to do. Yesuhan. Did you bring Xiao Jinyan into the palace? You knew he was the prince of Daxia. Shen Chuwei was stunned for a moment when he heard the words, and then realized that Xiao Jinyan was the prince of Daxia, and it seemed very bad to enter the palace without the emperor's knowledge. She was so excited that she forgot about it. My father wanted to see him, so I brought him in. Yesuhan knew that she had misunderstood, so he explained, I don't mean to blame you. Shen Shui, then what do you mean? Yesuhan said, it's not interesting, it's just that I can't stand it. Shen Shui. Yesuhan took a step forward, but before he could touch her, Shen Shui took 2 steps back and looked at him warily, if you have something to say, say it well, but don't touch her. Yesuhan's hand paused in the air, and she suddenly realized that Xiaju was no longer the little girl she was before. She only had Xiao Jinyan in her eyes. Is it just because I met Xiao Jinyan first? I want to know, do you really just like Xiao Jinyan's face? Shen Shui asked, does this have anything to do with you? Yesuhan took 2 steps forward and quickly grabbed her hand. His questioning tone made him look slightly ferocious at this time. How come it doesn't matter? My father and master were engaged when we were young. Do you think it has anything to do with it? Shen Shui was really shocked. He was very strong and couldn't struggle away at all. She frowned. The matter of engagement was also mentioned by the Imperial Master 2 days ago. If Feng Guiyu and Yesuhan really had an engagement, and they met again and found out that Feng Guiyu had married another man, it would be reasonable to be angry. But this has nothing to do with her. Unfortunately, since she now takes Feng Guiyu's identity, she will naturally have to bear the dissatisfaction from Yesuhan. But, I was still young at that time and didn't understand anything. I couldn't count. Yesuhan stared at her blankly for a while, with a hint of fear in his evasive eyes. He had never thought of making her afraid of him. She was obviously not afraid of him when she was a child. After a long stalemate, he slowly let go of her hand. Shen Shui immediately took back his hand, rubbed his wrist, and curled his lips. You need to be cured of your habit of grabbing people's wrists. Yesuhan's eyes fell on her wrist. I don't seem to have used much strength. Shen Shui was slightly angry. What does this have to do with strength? Men and women are not intimate, do you understand? Don't you, an ancient person, understand better than I, a modern person? Yesuhan ignored her question and said, come for a walk with me. Shen Shui refused directly, I don't have time. Yesuhan stared at her for a few seconds. Xiao Jinyan, he. When Xiao Jinyan was mentioned, Shen Shui became a little nervous. Yesuhan was ruthless and Xiao Jinyan was no match for him. She didn't know what the grudges between Yesuhan and Xiao Jinyan were before, but now she knows it very well. As the saying goes, when a love rival meets, he becomes extremely jealous. You can only go around once in Sanssouci Palace. She deliberately emphasized her tone. She was in Sanssouci Palace and time could only go around once, not one more step. Yesuhan paused when he heard the words and didn't press any further. Ken. Shen Shui reluctantly followed Yesuhan and started walking in Wushao Palace. He saw the tigress and Xuetuan not far away, as well as Kiu, who was lazier than Xuetuan. She just called out, and 3 of them immediately heard the sound and flew over, running over. She glanced proudly at Yesuhan next to her. Now there were 2 people and 3 pets, visiting the Wushao Palace together. Yesuhan glanced at Kiu, who was hovering above his head, and then glanced at the huge Tigan in the middle. Xiaju was on the other side of the Tigan, and her petite figure was covered by the huge head of the Tigan. She was covered so tightly that she could only see the hem of her skirt blown by the wind. Xuetuan happily nestled in Xiaju's arms. Not everyone has this kind of treatment. Shen Shui took a slightly cheerful step and glanced secretly to the right. All he could see was the tiger lion's big head and its eyes as big as copper bells. If you want to see Yesuhan, you have to raise your head to see it. It's a pity that she won't look up and see a bigot. Xiaju. Shen Shui heard Yesuhan calling her, and she raised her voice and said, here you are. Yesuhan asked, do you really just like Xiao Jinyan's face? Shen Shui didn't want to answer such a childish question, so in order to prevent him from asking again, she replied, Of course I like it. Yesuhan asked again, what if he becomes ugly? Shen Shuwei replied almost without thinking, as long as he is Xiao Jinyan, even if he becomes ugly, I still like him. Becoming ugly? She suddenly stopped and patted the Tigan, lower your head. The tigress immediately lowered its head obediently. She looked at Yesuhan, what do you mean by this? Yesuhan turned his head and looked at Xiaoju's nervous expression. As expected, she would only show such an expression when Xiao Jinyan was mentioned. Literal meaning. Shen Chu frowned slightly, trying to make Xiao Jinyan look ugly. In other words, didn't he mean to ruin Xiao Jinyan's appearance? Only Yesuhan could think of such a perverted idea. You don't want to attack Xiao Jinyan, do you? Yesuhan looked at her with a half-smile, what do you think? Shen Shuwei felt a chill running down his spine, don't be so naive. I like Xiao Jinyan, starting with his appearance and ending with him as a person. So, even if he becomes ugly, he is still Xiao Jinyan. Yesuhan just looked at her quietly. Shen Shuwei continued to persuade, there is no grass anywhere in the world, why should I fall in love with a flower unrequitedly? Why should I hang myself half dead on a crooked tree and abandon the entire forest? What a waste. Shen Shuwei has always been eloquent, it just depends on whether she wants to. Since leaving the palace, she has discovered that sometimes she can't help herself. Yesuhan. Seeing his silence, Shen Shuwei knew that these words were of some use. As a result, I heard Yesuhan say, I won't give up easily. Shen Shuwei. Waste of her saliva. After walking around Sansu Palace, Shen Chu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If she continued shopping, she would have to finish digesting the pastries she just ate. She looked at Yesuhan and saw the silver mask on his cheek. She always felt that he was shameless. I've already walked around with you. It's better for you and Xiao Jinyan to keep a distance. It's not a good thing if there are many people in the palace. Yesuhan left these words and left. Shen Chu froze on the spot. It wasn't until the thin figure disappeared in the corridor that she realized. Was Yesuhan reminding her? Is there anyone else who wants to harm Xiao Jinyan? There are many people in the palace and many eyes, are you referring to the people in the palace? Shen Shuwei returned to the main hall with doubts, thinking that Xiao Jinyan and the Imperial Master should have come out after such a long time, but the door was still closed. She lay on the door and stared at the hole she had poked before, but she still couldn't see the National Master and Xiao Jinyan. Why don't you come out? Xuehui suddenly appeared from behind, Princess Juyo, do you want some tea and snacks? Shen Shuwei turned around after hearing the sound. First he saw an expressionless handsome face, and then he saw a plate of cakes and a new cup of tea. She praised, you are really everywhere. Xuehui said, it should be. Shen Shuwei picked up a piece of pastry and put it into his mouth, took a bite, and glanced at the hole in the study door, tell me, when will they come out? I heard that restoring memory takes energy and time, and we have to wait a little longer, Xuehui explained. Okay, Shen Shuwei continued eating pastries. An hour later, the door suddenly opened from the inside. Shen Shuwei immediately jumped up from her chair. When she saw the Imperial Master, she hurriedly called out, Dad. But his gaze passed through Jun Mocking and looked inside, asking excitedly, where is Jin Yan and others? Has his memory been restored? Jun Mocking looked at Xiaoju, who looked excited, and said calmly, you will know when you go in and take a look. Thank you for your help, Dad. I'll go in and see him first. Shen Shuwei raised his eyebrows at the Imperial Master and rushed in impatiently. Jun Mocking. Xuehui walked over, lowered his eyebrows and nodded, Master. Jun Mocking ordered, prepare hot water, I want to take a bath. Xuehui responded and went back to prepare hot water. Jun Mocking looked back at the study and left with even steps. At this time, in the study, it was so quiet that he could hear his excited heartbeat. After Shen Shuwei ran all the way in, she went straight behind the screen and saw Xiao Jinyan lying on the couch. She took 2 quick steps to the couch and found that Xiao Jinyan had woken up, just staring at the roof with his eyes open. She called softly, "Jinyan." Xiao Jinyan actually noticed someone coming, but a lot of memories flooded into his brain, making him overwhelmed for a while, and at the same time he felt a little headache. It was completely different from the tearing pain before. When the memory came back, he needed a lot of time to sort out the timeline. So when he looked at Shen Shuwei, his reaction was a little slow. Shen Shuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan intently and found that he just stared at her without saying anything. No way, is he stupid? She held Xiao Jinyan's hand tightly, and said in a tone of never giving up, "Jinyan, I'm here, it's okay." Xiao Jinyan, who was still trying to sort out his memories, looked confused. Shen Shuwei saw that he was still staring at her without blinking, frowned from time to time, and wailed in her heart, "Are you really stupid? It's over, I have to take care of 3 people." Xiao Jinyan finally couldn't help asking, "What do you mean by taking care of 3 people? Oh, don't we still have Dao Tao and Susu at home? If you are stupid, you will be the same as them. I will take care of you 3 at such a young age." Shen Shuwei didn't forget to praise herself after she finished speaking. It's really hard to find a woman like her. Xiao Jinyan, is there anyone who says this about her husband? Shen Shuwei sighed, in this case, let's withdraw as soon as possible, otherwise it will be difficult to get away again. Xiao Jinyan supported the couch and slowly sat up, and suddenly had the illusion of being top-heavy. He calmed down, and suddenly opened his arms and hugged her. They had been together all the time, but he felt like he had found her again. "I'm sorry for the trouble." Shen Shuwei was suddenly hugged by Xiao Jinyan. She was stunned for a moment, and then she was stunned again when she heard the gentle words. She was so gentle. She was a little confused. Why is the tone of voice different from the silly male protagonist in the storybook? They speak in a babyish and simple way, a bit like Dao Tao. Such a touching atmosphere was destroyed by Shen Shuwei's words. "Xiao Jinyan. Who is stupid? I'm not stupid, you don't have to lead 3 people, sorry, I disappoint you." Shen Shuwei was stunned. Xiao Jinyan was not stupid? She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan carefully. Such a smart and wise look is indeed not what a fool should have. "Xiao Jinyan." Shen Shuwei cried with joy, "Then why did you not say a word just now, looking at me stupidly? The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 584. "I thought you were stupid." Shen Shuwei's voice was a little choked, "but it doesn't matter if you're stupid, we can be salted fish together and still be prosperous. If Xiao Jinyan is really stupid, he can't be the prince, let alone the emperor. But Xiao Jinyan is also a prince, and it's not bad to be a salted fish together as an idle prince. In this way, their family of 4 can live leisurely in the prince's mansion without being restricted by the palace, and Xiao Jinyan doesn't have to deal with all kinds of affairs every day, tired like a dog." Xiao Jinyan excitedly hugged her into his arms again, and he hugged her very hard, like a lost treasure. Thinking about what happened after he disappeared, thinking about her traveling thousands of miles to find him, thinking about her never leaving. A person who is too lazy to eat or lie down, did so much for him, but he forgot about her. Not only forgot, but also said those words to her. "Xiaoju, I'm sorry." Shen Shuwei was hugged a little tightly by him. Although she didn't suffocate to death, she had a little difficulty breathing. "Why do you have to say sorry?" Xiao Jinyan said slowly, "You should have stayed in the palace with Desu, lying down after eating, and sleeping after finishing. But because I traveled thousands of miles and suffered from the bumpy ride, I should say sorry to you." Shen Shuwei said, "Isn't this just an accident? As long as you are fine, All this is worth it? Xiao Jinyan doesn't think so. Not everyone can be like her, persevering to come out to find her. The journey is long and the bumpy ride is not something that everyone can bear. Thank you for staying with me all the time. Xiao Jinyan has never said so many words of thanks, because he is very fortunate that Xiaju, although lazy, still cares about him. Shen Shuwei pushed him away again and looked him up and down. He had just recovered his memory and his face looked a little bad. I don't know if the process of recovering his memory was very painful. Is there anything uncomfortable? Xiao Jinyan shook his head. I remembered too many people and things at once, and I have a headache, but it will be better slowly. Shen Shuwei is a doctor, so he naturally knows the reason. Oh, then you take your time, we can't leave now anyway. Xiao Jinyan nodded. Shen Shuwei stood up and came to the table, picked up an empty teacup, picked up the teapot and poured a cup of water, turned around and came to the couch, and handed the teacup to Xiao Jinyan. Drink some tea first. Yes, Xiao Jinyan was thirsty, so he took the teacup from her hand and passed it to his lips and took a few sips to moisten his throat. Shen Shuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan for a long time, and thinking of the multiple choice question, she felt that it was time to ask. Who do you choose between me and Feng Wu? Xiao Jinyan paused while drinking tea, and when he looked at Xiaju, he suddenly remembered what she had said. Feng Wu and Shen Shuwei, one is a childhood sweetheart, and the other is his first wife. Who should he choose? Shen Shuwei didn't urge him, and just waited quietly. After all, it was a big problem in life, and he should choose carefully. Xiao Jinyan stared at Xiaju for a long time. Why don't you think you are Feng Wu? Shen Shuwei was a little helpless. I'm not, don't I know who I am? Do you think it's too difficult to choose? Yes, although Feng Wu has been with you for so many years, I have also been with you for many years, it is indeed not easy to choose. Xiao Jinyan said, but you are not Shen Shuwei. Shen Shuwei was stunned for a moment. When people are nervous, their eyes will roll around, because at this moment, her dark eyes are rolling non-stop. Xiao Jinyan continued, since that year when Shen Fenji fell into the lotus pond, you have become her. Shen Shuwei was stunned. How did Xiao Jinyan know? This is a secret she has kept for several years. You know everything. Xiao Jinyan nodded, yes, I knew it a few years ago. The personality is completely different. Shen Shuwei was surprised and relieved at the same time. It's good to know. Anyway, I was going to tell you when you remembered it. Now that you know it, you won't be surprised. Xiao Jinyan said, I have always been curious about where you came from and how you got into Shen Fenji's body. Shen Shuwei sighed, I come from the modern world, which is the future world. I got into her body inexplicably. Xiao Jinyan just thought about it carefully and knew what she meant. From the future world? Shen Shuwei continued, look, the original Shen Shuwei's personality is completely different from Feng Wu. Do you think she will be Feng Wu? Xiao Jinyan shook his head, of course not, she is not as good as Feng Wu. Shen Shuwei. He didn't let him say the second half of the sentence, even if it was the truth. I come from the modern world. Do you think I might be Feng Wu? Xiao Jinyan was silent. Shen Shuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan without blinking, and asked again, Feng Wu and me, who do you choose? Xiao Jinyan was silent again, never thinking that he would face such a choice. In the unfamiliar Nanzao kingdom, although he was 8 years old and more sensible and smart than his peers, he was still a child after all. It was normal for a hostage to be bullied in the palace. When he first went there, it was particularly painful. No matter whether he restrained his brilliance or ignored them, they could always find various reasons to find fault and bully him. It was Xiaju who protected him and helped him, always using her soft voice to stop their unreasonable troubles. She would also call him Brother Jinyan in a soft voice. Although Xiaju was young, she was very smart. In addition, she was the daughter of the national teacher, so even the princes and princesses respected her a little. In Nanzao country, where he had no relatives, Xiaoju had always been with him during those years, so that he would not be so lonely in a strange country. When he left Nanzao country, he promised Xiaoju that he would come to find her. However, Xiaoju had an accident when she came to see him off. When he thought of that scene, his heart would still ache unbearably, as if he was suffocating. He had been dreaming for some time, and what he dreamed of was the scene of Xiaoju's accident when he left Nanzao country. Each time was clearer and more painful than the last. The heart-wrenching pain made him know that Xiaoju was very, very important to him. The Xiaoju in front of him had the same personality, the same hobbies, and even the way of speaking was very similar to Xiaoju. Possessing the same abilities. Are there really people who are so similar in the world? They have been in love for more than 4 years, and have spent almost 5 years together. They also have a pair of smart and lovely children. He would naturally not give up. Shen Shuwei looked at the man in front of him with such a painful look in his eyes. This was the first time he had seen such a painful look. When the real Feng Wu appears, how will you treat her? Xiao Jinyan looked at her, with eyebrows and eyes similar to Xiaoju, and that serious expression seemed as if Xiaoju was talking to him. You and her are really alike, giving me the feeling that you are the same person. Xiaoju once asked me if we could recognize her at a glance when we met again after we grew up. I answered very confidently that I could recognize her. Shen Shuwei was a little helpless, but I'm not. Xiao Jinyan still didn't give up. The state master also thinks you are her. Others may not believe it, but the state master can still believe it. Shen Shuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan for a long time, and actually had the answer from his hesitation. Feng Wu is very, very important to him, and he can't give it up. She is also very, very important as his wife, and she can't give it up. If the real Feng Wu appears, she thinks, Xiao Jinyan may run to her without hesitation, or hug Feng Wu like he just hugged her. Perhaps, he will suppress his feelings for Feng Wu for the sake of responsibility. That feeling is ignorant, the first throbbing of a young man. After all, there is a part of Xiao Jinyan's heart that belongs to Feng Wu. Shen Shuwei sighed a little. As expected, she had read too many storybooks, and the plots in them were just happening to her. It was because of the experience that she could empathize with the sentences in the storybooks when she recalled them. What disappointed her was that Xiao Jinyan did not firmly choose her. Xiao Jinyan saw that she was silent and was a little anxious. Xiaoju. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. I want to go back to Daxia. Dao Tao and Susu haven't seen me for so long, and they almost forgot about me as their mother. Xiao Jinyan was surprised that time passed so quickly. It's been so long since she came out. It's no wonder that she missed Dao Tao and Susu. If she is not Xiaoju, where would Xiaoju go? Who wants to harm Xiaoju after she has been missing for so long? After we finish dealing with things here, we will go back to Daxia. Shen Shuwei nodded, yeah. After lunch, Xiao Jinyan needed to rest because he had just recovered his memory. Shen Shuwei sat on the arch bridge, watching the fish swimming happily in the water. She took a bite of the mung bean cake and pinched a little mung bean cake with her other hand and threw it into the water. The fish swam over with its beautiful tail and opened its mouth to eat the tiny mung beans. June Mocking came out of the main hall and saw Xiaoju sitting on the arch bridge. Usually, he went to sleep after lunch. He walked over. What's wrong? Shen Shuwei saw a pair of snow-white boots appear in front of her. When she looked up, she saw the master of the state standing in front of her. She stood up and patted the dust on her buttocks. Dad, I'm feeding the fish. June Mocking saw that his daughter was unhappy at a glance. Aren't you happy that Xiao Jinyan has recovered his memory? Shen Chu smiled and said, I am happy, of course I am happy. June Mocking rubbed her head, then why are you so depressed? Did he bully you? Shen Chu shook her head slightly. He won't bully me. June mocking said, I don't think he would dare to do that. Shen Chu couldn't help laughing out loud. You are so powerful, he is afraid of you. June mocking looked at his daughter laughing so happily, and his daughter looked very much like her when she laughed, and she was very beautiful. Whoever dares to bully my daughter, I will never let him go. Shen Chu stared at the national teacher for a long time. This beautiful face can be said to be never boring. Xiao Jinyan has always said that the national teacher is very powerful and will not mistake his daughter. Is it more powerful than paternity testing? She expressed doubt. How can you be sure that I am your daughter? What if I am not? June mocking took her hand and sat down on the arch bridge, and Shen Chu also sat down obediently. New book, please add a bookshelf. Sweet pet article. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 585. Shen Chuwei looked at the spotless master of the imperial household, who sat on the ground with her, which was not in line with his temperament. In her eyes, master of the imperial household was high and mighty, and sitting on the arch bridge like her was a loss of status. June mocking's tone was gentle and gentle. How could I mistake my own daughter? I raised you by myself, and I can recognize you at a glance. Shen Chuwei looked at master of the imperial household in doubt. She was originally guilty, but now she was not guilty. Because master of the imperial household recognized her, even if she said she was not, he would probably stubbornly believe that she was. So, even if the identity was exposed, would master of the imperial household not be angry? Perhaps it was because master of the imperial household was too kind, and the tone of the chat became relaxed. You are so handsome, how did you become a single father? It's no wonder she asked this question. Isn't he a single father who raised her by himself? June mocking has a cold and expressionless personality. If it were someone else, he would have laughed a long time ago. Does being single-parented have anything to do with being handsome? Of course it does. Where did your mother go? Shen Chuwei looked at June mocking curiously, as if she had never heard him talk about Feng Wu's mother. When she mentioned her mother, June mocking was silent for a few seconds, thinking back to when Xiaju was a child. He would also quarrel with him for his mother when he saw that others had mothers, and he couldn't coax her. When he was older, he would also ask him where his mother was. However, she was sensible since she was a child, and if he explained it briefly, she wouldn't cry as hard as she did when she was a child. He lowered his eyes and looked at his daughter. Now she is an adult, not only sensible, but also knows a lot. When you were a child, she suddenly disappeared. Shen Chuwei was stunned when she heard this, and she never thought it would be this answer. Disappeared suddenly. She glanced at the national teacher. He was so powerful and could tell fortunes. Couldn't he find her? Although she was a little curious, she didn't continue to ask. After all, it was someone else's private matter. She took out the oil paper bag from her sleeve pocket, and after opening it, there was a piece of jujube paste cake inside, which was a little sweeter than the chestnut crisp. She smiled and raised the jujube paste cake. Dad, have a piece of jujube paste cake, it's a little sweet. June mocking lowered his eyes and looked at the jujube paste cake in her hand. The cakes in the imperial kitchen were exquisite and delicious. He looked up at Xiaju, and took the jujube paste cake and took a bite in her expectant eyes. Chew carefully, it's very sweet. Shen Chuwei looked at the way the national teacher ate the cake, and imagined how young he was when he was young. Dad, when you were young, were you so tender that you could squeeze out water? June mocking has always been calm and indifferent, but he was still amused by his daughter's words, but he didn't show it on his face. There is no difference between me 10 years ago and me now. The calm tone made Shen Chuwei envious. How many people use all kinds of maintenance just to age slowly, but they have used countless skincare products and still can't resist the traces brought by time. But the national teacher can easily keep his appearance unchanged for 10 years. If it were in modern times, the national teacher would be the ancestor of the national immortal male god. I envy my father so much. June mocking rubbed her head and continued to take a bite of the jujube paste cake, which was sweeter than before. Shen Shuiwu chatted with the national master for a while, and finally couldn't bear it anymore. He said goodbye to the national master and went back to the bedroom to take a nap. When Xiao Jinyan woke up, he stared at the top of the bed for a while, then got up, dressed, and went to find Xiaju. When he went out, he saw the little palace maid asking and learned that Xiaju was taking a nap in the bedroom. After he learned about it, he went to the bedroom as soon as possible. The bedroom was quiet, and the air was filled with faint agar wood. When Xiao Jinyan stepped into the bedroom, he saw Xiaju lying on the couch, with his arms resting on his dark head, and his sleeping posture had not changed. He sat down on the couch, lowered his eyes and looked at the sleeping person, and spent some time sorting out the memories in his mind. About the Nanzhao kingdom, there are also about the Daxia palace. Perhaps it was his selfishness that he felt that Shen Shuwei and Feng Wu were very similar, like the same person. I hope they are the same person. Xiaju was still sleeping soundly, so he didn't wake her up. After watching her for a while, he got up and walked out. When he got out of the door, he saw the Imperial Master standing not far away, as if he was waiting for him on purpose. Xiao Jinyan stepped forward and greeted, "Master, Imperial Master." June mocking looked at Xiao Jinyan with his cold eyes. "Do you know why Xiaju disappeared?" Xiao Jinyan lowered his head slightly. "I was just about to report this to Master, Imperial Master. On the day I left Nanzhao Kingdom, Xiaju came to see me off secretly. Suddenly, a man in black appeared. He was very skilled in martial arts and I was defeated. Xiaju was injured by the man in black and taken away by force." June mocking asked, "Then what happened?" "I was seriously injured and unable to move. Xiaju and the man in black were missing. The third prince. He said that as long as I forget Xiaju, he will go to save Xiaju." June mocking asked coldly, "Did you lose your memory because of Yesuhan?" Xiao Jinyan nodded, "Yes, I dare not deceive Master, Imperial Master." Every time Xiao Jinyan thinks of the scene at that time, he is obviously anxious, but there is nothing he can do. At that time, Yesuhan threatened Xiaju's life, and he had no choice but to compromise. However, Yesuhan still did not keep his promise and rescue Xiaju. June mocking's eyes were cold. Could he be the one who could attack Xiaju and had great martial arts skills? I know. June mocking left with even steps after saying this. Xiao Jinyan originally wanted to ask about Xiaoju, but the Imperial Master did not give him a chance to speak. The Imperial Master believed that Shen Shuwei was Feng Wu. There must be a reason, otherwise he would not be so sure that Shen Shuwei was his daughter Xiaoju. Xiao Jinyan looked at the familiar Wu Palace. Xiaoju used to bring him here to play, and so many years have passed in the blink of an eye. Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan looked back when he heard the voice, and saw the man wearing a silver mask walking towards him, and he was also the third prince Yesuhan. "Third prince, long time no see." Yesuhan frowned when he heard the words, and keenly noticed that Xiao Jinyan in front of him had become a little different, and his tone was different from before. "Have you recovered your memory?" Xiao Jinyan did not hide it. "It was Xiaju who asked the Imperial Master to help me recover my memory." He paused here and asked Yesuhan in a cold voice, "You said that as long as I voluntarily forgot Xiaju, you could save Xiaju, but what happened? Did you do it?" Yesuhan also guessed that it was the master who helped him recover his memory, and only the master had this ability. "I will do what I promised. Even if you are not here, I will try my best to save Xiaju." Xiao Jinyan's cold eyes were full of resentment. "In this case, why do you still threaten me to forget Xiaju? Yesuhan sneered, "You are asking me to do something, isn't it reasonable for me to ask for a reward?" Xiao Jinyan clenched his fists. The situation was urgent at the time, and he had no time to think about it, so he asked Yesuhan, who usually disliked him, for help. Knowing that Yesuhan would save Xiaju, he did not dare to bet with Xiaju's life. When he decided to forget Xiaju, he was in great pain and promised Xiaju that he would come back to find her and take her to eat all the delicacies in Daxia. But he broke his promise. He looked at Yesuhan with red eyes. "I never offended you in Nanzao Kingdom, but you rushed to Mobei to get rid of me. It was not enough to cripple my legs and my eyes, you even dug out the scar on my heart. How much do you hate me?" When he fell off the cliff, his consciousness was blurred, and he thought he was going to die at the bottom of the cliff. At that time, the images that flashed through his mind were all Xiaju. After several months of separation, he promised to go back safely, but he was going to break his promise. Yesuhan did not deny that these were all done by him, and even the reasons were very sufficient. "Blame it if you want to, you shouldn't get close to Xiaju, and you shouldn't like Xiaju." Xiao Jinyan drew a soft sword from his waist and pointed it at Yesuhan. "Because of you, Xiaju came out of the palace to find me, and suffered so much along the way. This account should be settled." Yesuhan sneered, "You have been in Nanzao Kingdom for several years, and we have never had the opportunity to spar. Today, let's see who is better." The two said they would fight, and they fought. When the tiger lion heard the noise, it ran over with the wolf and saw two figures fighting each other. Kiu fluttered her wings to watch the fun, watching the two people flying back and forth and fighting in a ball. "Come on, come on." Kiu is a parrot, and has learned a lot of words. She is best at "come on," and she likes to say these two words the most. Shen Shuwei didn't take a good nap, so she heard Kiu's call, which was like a buzzing fly and was particularly annoying. She rubbed her eyes and looked out the window in a daze. Now she could hear the call more clearly. Come on, you are awesome, I will reward you with a lollipop." Where did the child come from? Shen Shuwei lifted the quilt, put on her clothes, opened the door and walked out. It was already sunset. When she saw Kiu standing on the forehead of the tiger lion, she knew that the childlike call just now came from Kiu's mouth. "I didn't realize that it was still a parrot that could only talk. Lollipops are also rewarded, but there are no lollipops here." Then, there was the sound of cold weapons colliding, and two figures appeared in front of them, one in moon white and the other in black. For a moment, there were flashes of swords and shadows, and murderous aura was looming. After seeing the two people fighting clearly, she hurried over. Stop it, stop it." Shen Shuwei couldn't figure it out. Why did they fight when she was just sleeping for a while? When Shen Shuwei rushed over, the two people who were fighting evenly separated consciously and stood on each side. Shen Shuwei naturally rushed to Xiao Jinyan and looked him up and down. "Are you not injured?" Xiao Jinyan comforted him gently, "I'm fine." Yesuhan looked at the scene in front of him coldly. Xiaoju's worry and nervousness were only for Xiao Jinyan, fearing that he would be hurt. Under the mask, he was already jealous and crazy. Shen Shuwei didn't find any obvious wounds, so he was relieved. Why did you fight with him? In fact, she was worried that Xiao Jinyan could not beat Yesuhan. Every time he was injured, he needed a long time to recover. Xiao Jinyan did not hide it from her. "In Mobei, he broke my legs and eyes and knocked me off the cliff. If it weren't for him, I would have returned victorious long ago, and you wouldn't have to go through so much trouble to find me." Shen Shuwei looked at Yesuhan indignantly, "You are too vicious. He has no grudges against me. Why do you have to be so vicious? You have tried to harm him again and again." Yesuhan stood there straight, listening to Xiaju's accusations, complaints, and resentment. He never thought that the childhood sweethearts who had a good relationship with her would become like this. After a long stalemate, Yesuhan said word by word, if he stayed away from you, I wouldn't do it to him. Shen Shuwei replied, who I am close to has nothing to do with you. Yesuhan said, we are childhood sweethearts, how can it have nothing to do with each other? Shen Shuwei wanted to refute, but thought that if she said it, it would be over, so she simply ignored him. Shen Shuwei ignored him, but it didn't mean that Yesuhan would not take the initiative to pay attention to her. You ignore me for him. What's good about him? Shen Shuwei turned her head and looked at Yesuhan, have you said enough? Yesuhan was stunned. Shen Shuwei said, why I ignore you, don't you know it in your heart? You have been hurting my relatives, how can I care about you? Can you talk and laugh with the person who killed your relatives, as if nothing happened? Yesuhan stared at her steadily, and said word by word, if that person is you, I can. Shen Shuwei. Pervert. I can't do it. Yesuhan looked at her silently, and after a long time, he retracted his gaze and turned away. Shen Shuwei looked at Yesuhan's thin back, feeling a little lonely. She retracted her gaze and looked at Xiao Jinyan, is Feng Wu on good terms with him? Xiao Jinyan nodded. It is undeniable that Xiaoju and Yesuhan have a good relationship. Shen Shuwei sighed, no wonder he is so sad. Forget it, I'm hungry, let's go find something to eat first. Shen Shuwei said and walked towards the small kitchen. Before she took 2 steps, she was grabbed by Xiao Jinyan's wrist, Xiaoju. Shen Shuwei looked back at him in confusion, what's wrong? Xiao Jinyan said seriously, I won't give up on you. Shen Shuwei did not show a surprised expression, as if it was an expected answer. I know. Xiao Jinyan asked again, have you asked the Imperial Master why he is sure that you are Feng Wu? Shen Shuwei nodded, I asked, he said that Feng Wu was raised by him and he would not make a mistake. Xiao Jinyan continued to ask, what about you? Do you think you might be Feng Wu? Shen Shuwei shrugged helplessly, if I hadn't come from the modern era, I might have believed it. June mocking suddenly came over, what are you talking about? Shen Shuwei shuddered with fear, turned her head and saw the Imperial Master standing behind her. She raised her head with a guilty conscience and saw the handsome man. Dad, why are you walking without making any sound? I'm scared to death, but she was so scared in her heart. Did the Imperial Master not hear what she said just now? Xiao Jinyan bowed and saluted, Master Imperial Master. June mocking glanced at Xiao Jinyan and then looked at Xiaoju, I asked you to practice, but you were lazy. People with deep inner strength have almost no footsteps. Shen Chu smiled and said, practicing is too tiring, how can it be as comfortable as sleeping? June mocking's eyes were full of pampering, it's because you are too lazy that it's difficult to pass on kung fu to you. Shen Chu slightly thought of the business, raised his head and looked at the Imperial Master, Dad, I want to go back to Daxia. Good night. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 586. When Feng Wu was very young, June Mocking wanted to teach her kung fu, and started to practice basic skills at the age of 3. However, when he saw his 3-year-old soft and cute daughter, her lotus-like arms and short legs, he felt a little sorry. He thought he would start practicing when she was older. A year passed quickly, and when Xiaoju was 4 years old, she didn't grow much, but her coquettish skills improved. He asked her to learn to squat, and she sat on a small stool. Daddy, sit down obediently, okay. Her pink and tender face still had baby fat, and she spoke in a baby voice, so June Mocking couldn't say a word of no. He comforted his daughter in his heart that it would be better when she was older. When she was older, June Mocking took out Po Yu and gave her some simple moves. As a result, Xiaoju carefully took out a small mooncake wrapped in oil paper from her arms, took him Po Yu in her little hands, carefully cut the small mooncake into 2 pieces, and then handed one of them to him. "Daddy, there's only this piece left, let's share it." At that time, June Mocking thought that it was too unlikely for his daughter to learn martial arts. So, he saw Yesuhan playing well with Xiaoju. Yesuhan was 4 years older than Xiaoju and was a good material for martial arts, so he accepted him as his apprentice with only one request, which was to protect Xiaoju. Suddenly hearing Xiaoju say that he was going back to Daxia, June Mocking was a little confused. Go back to Daxia? What for? Shen Chuwei was a little guilty and didn't dare to look directly into the eyes of the national teacher. I have been living in Daxia, so I want to go back. Mainly, she missed Dao Tao and Susu. She hadn't seen them for too long, and she really missed them. June Mocking nodded. Since you want to go back to Daxia, I will go back with you after I finish my business. Shen Chuwei was shocked for a few seconds. You are going too? She will not come back after she goes back, and she is the crown princess of Daxia, and she has 2 babies. If the national master goes with her, he will know her secrets. Cheating the national master is originally for a purpose. What if the national master keeps misunderstanding? June Mocking said, of course, I have nothing to do and I will accompany you for a trip, so what's the harm? Shen Chuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan and told him 2 words with her eyes, it's over. Xiao Jinyan saw her eyes and then looked at the national master. It was normal for the national master to accompany his daughter. However, Shen Chuwei wanted to run away. If the national master followed her, not only would she not be able to run away, but her secrets would also be discovered. It was indeed a very difficult thing to do. Shen Chuwei was a little helpless, and she didn't have the courage to say that she was a fake. If she said it, wouldn't it be equivalent to deliberately deceiving his feelings? Dad, what are you going to deal with? There are some old and new accounts to settle, June Mocking said concisely. Oh, Shen Chuwei nodded thoughtfully. After the national master left, Shen Chuwei took Xiao Jinyan to the bedroom and closed the door. Xiao Jinyan looked at her movements in confusion. What are you doing? After Shen Chuwei closed the door, she looked up at Xiao Jinyan and said in a low voice, when the national master goes to deal with things, let's go. Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect her to be so anxious to go back to Daxia. Are you in such a hurry to leave? Shen Chuwei nodded vigorously. Yes, this is a rare opportunity, otherwise we won't be able to get away. Xiao Jinyan hesitated, but... Shen Chuwei seemed to see his hesitation. Aren't you in a hurry to go back to Daxia? After a few seconds of silence, Xiao Jinyan raised his head and looked at her. Xiaoju, things here haven't been dealt with yet. When they are dealt with, we will go back to Daxia, okay? Shen Chuwei suddenly realized that what he was talking about might be related to Fengwu. Do you want to check Fengwu's news? Xiao Jinyan did not hide it. I want to check it out. The national teacher should also check her disappearance that year. Shen Chuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan for a long time without blinking, and finally decided, then you stay and check it out. I'll go back to Daxia first. Xiao Jinyan held her hand nervously, feeling a little uneasy. Xiaoju, let's go back together. Shen Chuwei shook her head. I miss Dao Tao and Susu. It's better to go back to Daxia and relax instead of being worried here every day. I only give you 1 month. Whether you find it or not. Xiao Jinyan interrupted her directly. Xiaoju. Shen Chuwei looked at him, her voice seemed very calm. What do you want to say? Xiao Jinyan said word by word, let's go back together. Shen Chuwei replied with 2 words very straightforwardly, no. Before, because Xiao Jinyan was the prince, she followed the local customs, so she didn't dare to go against his wishes in everything, but she also had a bottom line. It's true that she's lazy. She's too lazy to fight for favor, too lazy to eliminate the mistress, too lazy to fight for it. She thinks that as long as Xiao Jinyan keeps her in mind and can do what he promised her, it's fine. If he can't do it and touches her bottom line, she will withdraw, because she has always left a way out for herself and has spent 4 years easily. Who would have thought that a heavyweight white moonlight and childhood sweetheart would appear? This is something she never thought of. If she had known at the beginning, she would definitely keep a distance from Xiao Jinyan, and would rather stay in Xiaoxiang Pavilion than be a crown princess. Xiao Jinyan had never seen her throw a tantrum, and such a firm look let him know that she was determined to go back. Nanzhaokyo is thousands of miles away from Daxia. How can I let you go back alone? Shen Shuwei said, just let Qin Xiao escort me back. I can disguise myself as an old woman and keep a low profile all the way. I won't be missed by bad guys if I don't show my wealth or appearance. This is Shen Shuwei's cleverness. She knows how to protect herself when she is outside and her strength does not allow it. Even so, Xiao Jinyan did not agree with her going back to Daxia first. No matter what, I will not let you go back to Daxia alone. I am worried without me by your side. Shen Shuwei knew there was no room for negotiation when she heard his tone, but it did not mean that she gave up. In the past 2 days, Shen Shuwei confirmed again and again that the national teacher was not in the palace, so she began to pack her luggage. In fact, she had very few things in the palace, almost all of which were prepared by the emperor for her, so she did not need to bring them. She put all the things in the space. She asked people to prepare a lot of meat for the tiger-lion beast to eat, and she didn't know whether the tiger-lion beast would be sent to the cage again after she left. However, these were not what she should care about. Although reluctant, they still had to separate after all. She looked up at the colorful feathers above her head, pecking at her beautiful feathers leisurely. She could speak, but she didn't say a word. Shen Shuwei took out a pen and paper and wrote a letter and put it in his guest room. Before leaving, she looked down at Sichuan, hesitating whether to take it with her. After thinking about it, she decided to take it with her. While Xiao Jinyan was away, Shen Shuwei got on the carriage with Sichuan in her arms, took the token, and left the palace smoothly all the way. After leaving the palace, when the carriage drove to a busy section of the road, Shen Shuwei asked the eunuch to wait here, and she sneaked away with Sichuan in her arms. It was not the first time that the eunuch followed Shen Shuwei out of the palace, so he didn't think much about it and stayed there honestly. Shen Shuwei looked back at the eunuch, and could only make it difficult for him to wait until dark. She retracted her gaze and continued to walk with Sichuan in her arms. You can't leave by your legs, so you have to hire a carriage. To hire a carriage ticket, Shen Shuwei disguised herself as a grandmother in her 50s or 60s. She knew how to put on some makeup. Clothes were easy to buy, and she could buy any set at the store. After changing, Shen Shuwei, who was originally the same age as a flower, became a grandmother in her 50s or 60s. On the way to hire a carriage, she bought some pastries and cakes. Shen Shuwei saw an ordinary carriage with a strong horse, so she negotiated the price with the coachman. Shen Shuwei would not always hire a carriage, and would change carriages at the next stop. The coachman saw that it was an old woman, and wanted to raise the price, but was afraid that she could not afford the silver. This is the price, do you think it's okay? Shen Shuwei hesitated for a while, then nodded, okay. The coachman got off the carriage, holding the whip in his hand and pulling the hem of his clothes, while saying, then get on the carriage. Shen Shuwei took 3 times the usual time to get on the carriage with Sichuan in her arms. After getting on, she lifted the curtain and looked at Nanzhao country. It has been a while since she came here, and she still can't bear to leave the delicious food here. As the groom whipped the horse and shouted, the horse trotted. Shen Shuwei lowered the curtain, looked down at Swichuan, and rubbed its head. This was the first time she had to travel so far alone. But it was worth it to be able to return to Daxia, but the journey was long and it would take time. Swichuan was in a daze. Although he didn't understand what Xiaju was doing, he still stayed in her arms obediently. When Xiao Jinyan came back, he didn't see Xiaju. When he saw the little palace maid passing by, he asked, "Where is Princess Juyu?" The little palace maid replied, "The master has left the palace." Left the palace? Xiao Jinyan had a bad premonition. He returned to his guest room. As soon as he sat down, he saw a piece of paper under the teapot. He took out the paper and opened it, and saw familiar words. "Jinyan, when you see this letter, I have left the capital city. I really miss Dao Tao and Susu. I have never left them for so long. They are still so young. What they need most is the company of their parents. I will protect myself, rest assured. You also protect yourself." Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a long time after reading the letter. Xiaju, who had always been well behaved, left without saying goodbye for the first time, leaving only a letter of less than 100 words. It seemed like a few simple sentences, but it was different from the past. There was no lightheartedness and playfulness between the lines. Xiao Jinyan clenched the letter in his hand, stood up suddenly and ran out. After recovering his memory, Xiao Jinyan's kung fu was obviously better than before, and his light kung fu was even better. After leaving the palace, Xiao Jinyan bought a horse and drove straight out of the city. Xiaju had never gone out alone. Even if she was smart, a delicate woman was still very dangerous. The carriage was shaking, and Shen Chuwei was a little drowsy. She hugged Swichuan and leaned on the cushion of the carriage, intending to sleep for a while. Anyway, she was old and poor now, and robbing her was a waste of time. She was sleepy and leaned in the carriage, and fell asleep soon. I don't know how long it took, and there was the sound of horse hooves. As the sound of horse hooves got closer, the groom whipped the horse and drove it to the side of the road. Xiao Jinyan whipped the horse hard, wishing he could ride 1,000-mile horse. He was afraid that he would not be able to catch up with Xiaju if it was too late, and he was also afraid that something would happen to her. He didn't know whether Xiaju would leave on horseback or in a carriage. The possibility of riding a horse was higher, because it was faster. If she wanted to leave so much, she would choose to ride a horse first. However, what Xiao Jinyan didn't expect was that Shen Chuwei was lazy and it wouldn't matter if she hurried on for a few days. Anyway, she slept during the day and at night, and traveling day and night could save time. Xiao Jinyan whipped the horse whip hard, glanced at the carriage on the official road, and then retracted his gaze and continued on his way. A carriage can never be as good as riding a horse. It didn't take long for the distance to be pulled away. The groom looked at the horse going away and sighed, "Sure enough, riding a horse is the most elegant." The sky gradually darkened. Shen Chuwei woke up from a nap and found that the carriage was pitch black. She rubbed her eyes, lifted the curtain and looked outside, and found that the sun had set, leaving only a trace of afterglow in the sky. She took out the oil paper bag from the space, picked up a piece of shortbread and put it in her mouth and took a bite. Seeing Swichuan, she took out a piece and put it in front of it. Swichuan lowered his head and ate the shortbread. The shortbread was very crispy and fragrant. After eating it once, he became a little addicted. Shen Chuwei ate 2 pieces in a row, took out the kettle from the space, poured a glass of water and drank a sip, and poured some water for Swichuan to quench her thirst. She had only walked such a short distance and she began to want to eat meat, vegetables, and so many other things. What should she do? Suddenly, there was a sound of horse hooves, coming from far away. Shen Chuwei's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Xiao Jinyan was catching up? She hurriedly lifted the curtain and looked outside, listening carefully to the sound of horse hooves. She found that the sound came from the front, and then she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It shouldn't be from the front. Xiao Jinyan searched all the way but didn't see Shen Shui's figure. Even if she rode a horse, she couldn't catch up with her delicate body. So he came back again. He saw the carriage on the road and found that it was the one he found when he went there. He thought about it and stopped the carriage. The coachman was forced to pull the reins. Just as he was about to curse, he saw the man on the horse suddenly flying over, and he jumped off the carriage in a hurry. Shen Shui found that the carriage stopped suddenly, and she opened the curtain in confusion, and saw Xiao Jinyan's handsome face, which frightened her and she didn't know how to react. Because he left secretly without saying goodbye, she felt guilty. Xiao Jinyan saw a face in his 50s or 60s, frowned, and turned to leave. Shen Shui was stunned when she saw him leave, and then she remembered that she disguised herself as an old woman, so she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Just when she breathed a sigh of relief, Xiao Jinyan came back, which made her heart lift again. When Xiao Jinyan left, he suddenly remembered that Xiaju said that he would disguise himself as an old lady and travel low-key, so he came back to see clearly. Xiaju, he called tentatively. Shen Shui thought, no way, can you recognize this? She cleared her throat and said in an old voice, you recognized the wrong person. Although it's not as good as those voice actors' old voices, it's still okay. Xiao Jinyan frowned. Did she really recognize the wrong person? When he looked away, he saw a snow-white figure in the carriage. I saw the comments of the treasures, thank you for your support until now, the rhythm will keep up, the ending will be perfect, and the heroine's mother will appear later. Good night. By the way, please vote for the monthly ticket and recommendation ticket. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 587. Xiao Jinyan almost opened the curtain without thinking. There was only one curtain in front of the ordinary carriage. After he opened it so hard, a ray of light appeared in the originally dark carriage. Shen Shui instinctively shrank back. In her heart, Xiao Jinyan was not such a rude person, especially to an old woman in her 50s or 60s. What are you doing? The old voice was trembling slightly, and you could hear the guilt if you listened carefully. Sichuan hid behind Xiaju, revealing only a small white fluffy head. In the dim light, the blue eyes emitted a dazzling halo like a gem. Xiao Jinyan approached without saying a word. Shen Shui's guilty back moved back. As Xiao Jinyan approached, her body had tilted to an uncontrollable arc. Her heartbeat accelerated uncontrollably under tension. What did Xiao Jinyan want to do? Just when she was about to collapse, a strong arm hugged her slender waist, and before she could react, she was held in a warm embrace. Shen Shui was stunned for a few seconds, and was about to curse like an old woman, you. Before she could curse, Xiao Jinyan's slightly hoarse voice came to her ears, Xiaju, you scared me to death. Shen Shui opened her mouth but didn't say a word. She couldn't figure out how Xiao Jinyan recognized her. She obviously put on makeup very carefully, and in order to get closer to ordinary people, she deliberately made it ugly and dark. If she was recognized so easily, then her makeup was in vain? At this moment, a cat's cry came, meow. Shen Shui was stunned, lowered her eyes and glanced at Sichuan, and suddenly realized that it was not her but Sichuan who was exposed. I should have disguised Sichuan earlier, or even put on some pot-bottom ash. Sichuan tilted his head and looked at the two people in front of him, with a big doubt in his little head. Xiao Jinyan carried her out of the carriage and then mounted the horse. The groom stood there and watched a handsome man holding an old woman with dark wrinkles on her face, and was petrified on the spot. What happened to this world? Old women are so popular? It was not until the two of them got on the horse that he remembered to ask for silver. This young man, the silver has not been given yet. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the groom coldly and took out a tael of silver from his waist and gave it to the groom. The groom ran for an afternoon and was very happy to get a tael of silver. He didn't say a word of nonsense and went back to drive the carriage happily. Shen Shuwei watched the groom driving the carriage away, feeling a little disappointed. It was not easy to get out of the capital city, and now he had to follow Xiao Jinyan back. Most of the day's work was in vain. Xiao Jinyan held the reins tightly but did not move. He lowered his eyes and looked at the person in his arms. Seeing that she lowered her head, the sky was getting dark and she could not see her expression at this time. Xiaju, I don't know how to tell you how important Fengguiu is to me, and it's not something that can be explained in just a few words. Then don't say it. Shen Shuwei paused, and added, I don't want to listen even if you say it. Isn't it just that Baiyu Egwang is childhood sweethearts? It made her feel like she was listening to her husband talk about his ex. What do you say about being young and not understanding feelings? Sure enough, you can't believe what a man says. Xiao Jinyan's tone was a little helpless. In fact, he didn't know how to tell her about him and Fengguiu. All he could say was that Fengguiu was very, very important to him. Then don't say it for now, let's go back first. Shen Shuwei suddenly pressed his hand to stop him from doing the next move. Xiao Jinyan stopped and asked in a low voice, what's wrong? Shen Shuwei raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. At this time, the sky in autumn was dark early, but it was already dark in a short while. I can't see that familiar handsome face, but I can imagine how beautiful it is. Jinyan, I want to ask you a question. Xiao Jinyan, ask. Have you ever thought about marrying Fengguiu? It's no wonder Shen Shuwei asked this question. In ancient times, unlike modern times, men could have a mate at the age of 13 or 14. Xiao Jinyan was 16 when he returned to Daxia. 16 years old. Xiao Jinyan paused and nodded, yes. It was not a surprising answer. Shen Shuwei took a deep breath and continued to ask, then you said you wouldn't give up on me, because of responsibility? If time goes back 4 years ago, you remember Fengguiu, and there would be nothing for me, right? Xiao Jinyan pursed her lips tightly. Every question she asked was direct and to the point. People who have always been greedy and sleepy, people who don't care about anything else, when they are serious, they are more serious than him. I don't give up on you not only because of promises and responsibilities. I am an adult and I know my feelings for you. But I can't deny my feelings for Fengguiu. If I hadn't forgotten her, I would go find her. I find it incredible to have such feelings for two women, but that's the fact. We are married and can't be separated. He emphasized the last sentence. It was still not unexpected that he agreed. Shen Shuwei smiled helplessly. Who would have thought that such a bloody thing would happen to us? How nice it would be if you always remembered Fengguiu, you would still be you, and I would still be me, just like when we first came here, you wouldn't have to worry about guilt, and I wouldn't have to go through things that I didn't need to go through. Everyone would be happy, how nice it would be. Xiao Jinyan hugged her tightly from behind, he hugged her very tightly, for fear that she would suddenly disappear again. Do you know how scared I was when I saw the letter you left? Promise me, don't leave secretly again, okay? Shen Shu lowered her head slightly, and the snowball in her arm stayed still quietly. After a few seconds of silence, she raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, I'm hungry and want to eat. Xiao Jinyan hadn't had a drop of water since he came out, which was also an important reason for his hoarse voice. In fact, he was hungry, but his mind was looking for Xiaoju, so he ignored it. Then let's go back. Xiao Jinyan took off his outer robe, wrapped her petite body in it, and tied it up. After doing all this, he squeezed the horse's belly and rushed to the capital city. The horse galloped wildly, the cold wind whistled, and it was so cold that people shivered. Shen Chu shrank in Xiao Jinyan's arms, and she still felt cold even with a coat on. When they returned to the capital city, it was already late at night, and they almost couldn't enter the city because of the curfew. Most of the restaurants in the capital city were closed at this time, except for a few restaurants that were still open. Xiao Jinyan chose a restaurant with good dishes. After getting off the horse, he carried her straight in. Shen Shuwei didn't care about her image as an old woman at this time, and let Xiao Jinyan carry her in. The waiter greeted her with a smile, but when he saw the handsome young man holding an old woman, his smile froze on his face, and he almost thought he was seeing things. "Sir, what would you like to eat?" Xiao Jinyan booked a private room and ordered a few dishes that Shen Shuwei liked. There were only a few guests in the restaurant at this time. Xiao Jinyan carried Shen Shuwei and followed the waiter to the private room on the second floor. After a while, the dishes were served one after another. After the waiter brought the last braised pork, he smiled and said, "Sir, the dishes are all here, please enjoy." After that, he left. Shen Shuwei was really hungry, and the smell of food made her even hungrier. She picked up her chopsticks and glanced at the dishes in front of her. There were braised pork elbows, braised pork. She picked up a piece of braised pork and put it in her mouth, and then took a bite of rice. She was craving braised pork, and she hadn't eaten rice for a day, so it was really delicious. Xiao Jinyan took a few sips of water from the teacup to moisten his throat, but his eyes kept looking at Shen Shuwei. Seeing her eating, he thought she was very hungry. After drinking a cup of tea, he picked up the chopsticks to pick up the food and put it in his mouth, chewing it slowly. Sichuan stayed quietly on another chair, eating its fish. During the meal, Shen Shuwei didn't say a word and ate 5 bowls of rice until her stomach couldn't hold it anymore. She wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, and didn't notice that she wiped off the old age makeup around her lips without realizing it. Xiao Jinyan looked at the makeup on her face. It was no different from an old woman in her 50s or 60s. It was not easy to be discovered when walking on the road, and even familiar people would not recognize her. This is probably what she will look like in more than 30 years. After Shen Shuwei finished wiping, she found that Xiao Jinyan had been staring at her. Suddenly, she remembered that she was wearing old age makeup, and it was ugly old age makeup. "How do I look? Is it ugly?" Xiao Jinyan praised, "It's very good. Everyone will get old one day. It's not ugly with wrinkles on the face. Is it not ugly? I hate it when I look at it." Shen Shuwei touched her face and said, "When I am 50 or 60 years old, I will definitely look better than this." Xiao Jinyan nodded in agreement. "Wait for me here, I will go to remove my makeup," Shen Shuwei said and stood up and walked out. Xiao Jinyan also stood up and walked over. "I'll accompany you." Shen Shuwei stopped and shook her head at him. "It will be done in a while, no need to accompany you." Xiao Jinyan said stubbornly, "I want to accompany you." Shen Shuwei, "Okay." Accompanied by Xiao Jinyan, they came to the independent washing area downstairs. Sichuan could only follow on his 4 legs. Shen Shuwei took out the makeup remover and removed the old age makeup on her face bit by bit, gradually revealing her original appearance. Xiao Jinyan watched the whole process and was a little surprised that her disguise was so powerful. After removing her makeup, Shen Shuwei washed her face with clean water and wiped it with a handkerchief. Her face without makeup suddenly felt much more relaxed. She looked up at Xiao Jinyan, "Are we going back to the palace now?" Xiao Jinyan shook his head, "No, I'll sleep in the inn tonight and go back tomorrow." Shen Shuwei nodded. It was already very late and the palace gate was closed. It would be bad if they were found to have broken into the palace at night. Xiao Jinyan took her hand and walked out. Shen Shuwei followed him out of the restaurant. The inn was still some distance away. Xiao Jinyan carried her on the horse. Riding a horse was much faster than walking. Back to the inn, it was already late at night, and the two took a bath separately. After Shen Shuwei finished her bath, she sat down on the bed. Before she could even sit still, she saw Xiao Jinyan coming over in a white shirt. He had just finished his bath and had a faint fragrance. She moved inside to make room for him. Xiao Jinyan sat down beside the bed and looked at her sideways. Since they came to Nanzhao Kingdom, they had very few opportunities to sleep together, and they lived separately in the palace. Shen Shuwei found that Xiao Jinyan had been staring at her, and she didn't know what he was looking at. She yawned, "It's late, it's time to go to bed." Then she lay down on the bed, pulled the quilt over herself, thought about it, and turned sideways to face inside. Xiao Jinyan quietly watched her turn over with her back to him, remained silent for a few seconds, took off his shoes and lay down on the bed, then turned sideways and hugged her in his arms as usual. Shen Shuwei's body stiffened, and she slowly opened her eyes, looking down at the arms that were holding her. She used to sleep in his arms, but why did she feel a little weird now? Could this be a psychological reason? Sure enough, once something has a crack, it is difficult to restore it to its original state. Xiao Jinyan whispered in her ear, "Xiaoju, give me some time, wait for me to deal with it, and we will go back to Daxia together." Shen Shuwei said faintly. Xiao Jinyan looked at her reaction, not knowing if it was an illusion. She seemed to be a little different from before, as if she was deliberately staying away from him. There was silence for a long time, so long that Shen Shuwei was a little drowsy, and she seemed to hear Xiao Jinyan say in a daze, "Xiaoju, don't leave me." The next day, Shen Shuwei returned to Wuyu Palace and learned from the little palace maids and eunuchs that her disappearance had alarmed the emperor. If she didn't come back today, she would post an imperial edict to find someone. So exaggerated? Shen Shuwei went to the emperor to explain the situation as soon as possible and lied a little. The emperor didn't pursue it, but he was worried about her. Yasuhan came just after returning from the imperial study. "Where did you go yesterday?" Shen Shuwei naturally would not tell the truth, so she made up a random excuse, "I went out to play, is there something wrong?" Yasuhan only learned about this when he came back last night. He went out to look for her but couldn't find her. He just got the news that she had returned to the palace, so he rushed back. "It's okay, you can find me wherever you want to go, and I'll take you there." Shen Shuwei directly refused, "No, I'm not going anywhere." Yasuhan stared at her for a long time and asked, "Who made you unhappy?" Shen Shuwei paused after hearing this and denied, "I'm not unhappy." Yasuhan said, "You always have a faint smile on your eyebrows and eyes, and there is no smile in the corners of your eyes when you are unhappy." Shen Shuwei almost took out a mirror to see if it was the same as what he said. "That's because I didn't sleep well, so I'm going back to take a nap, goodbye." Shen Shuwei turned around and returned to her bedroom after saying this. Yasuhan stood there and watched her walk into the bedroom. Why didn't the master let her recover her memory? Ever since Shen Shuwei ran away once, Xiao Jinyan was a little worried. Every time she went out, she didn't dare to come back for too long, for fear that she would run away again. Yanyu also got the news and rushed over specially, just to see if this fake was guilty. When she came, she saw Shen Shuwei feeding the fish. There was no one else around at this time, so she didn't hesitate to talk. "I heard that you suddenly disappeared yesterday. Could it be that you ran away because you were guilty?" Shen Shuwei threw the pastry crumbs into the water and replied casually, "You guessed right, I ran away because I was guilty. What can you do to me? When the national teacher comes back, she will confess and be lenient. She doesn't want to be the fake Feng Wu anymore. Good night, Spicy. Ask for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets to support. Recommended pre-collected new books, babies add bookshelves, and books will be released in September. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 588. Shen Shuwei's flirtatious tone sounded like a sign of being carried away to Yanyu's ears. How could she bear it? "Don't think that just because the imperial master believes in you now, You think you are Feng Wu. A chicken can never turn into a phoenix. When the Imperial Master sees your hypocritical true face clearly, your death will come. Shen Chu made a slight feeding movement. She was pretending to be Feng Wu, but she never thought of becoming Feng Wu. Feng Wu was Feng Wu, and she was her. They were all independent individuals and unique. That's why Xiao Jinyan never forgets Feng Wu. She turned to look at Yan Yu, neither angry nor annoyed. Her tone was even more indifferent than her eyes. The Imperial Master is not as cruel as you. Don't impose your vicious thoughts on the Imperial Master. It will harm the Imperial Master. He has a fairy-like image in my heart. Before this impostor appeared, where had Yan Yu ever been bullied like this? How dare an impostor tell a real princess? Are you a fake and you still point your fingers at this princess? Let's see if this princess doesn't tear your mouth apart. Yan Yu looked ferocious, raised her hand and slapped the impostor in the face. Shen Chuwei threw away the pastry in his hand and quickly ducked back to avoid Yan Yu's angry slap. Yan Yu's slap was too fast. She missed the target and lost her balance for a moment. She screamed and fell into the water. Just listen to the sound of plop and water splashing everywhere. Shen Chuwei was startled and looked at Yan Yu splashing in the water. She said that it really had nothing to do with her and she just avoided it out of self-protection. Help, come here, help, Yan Yu choked on her water and thrashed around desperately. Shen Chuwei looked at Yan Yu who was still flopping desperately, and had no intention of reminding her kindly that the water was not deep, only up to her waist. After flopping for a long time, no one came to save her. When Yan Yu felt like she was going to die, she found that her feet could touch the bottom, but the water was only around her waist. She looked up at the impostor on the shore, who was gloating about his misfortune. She didn't need to look in the mirror to know that she looked very embarrassed. It was all the impostors who caused her to fall into the water and made her so embarrassed. The weather was very cold in autumn. After Yan Yu climbed up, she was so trembling that she couldn't even curse, and she left the Sanssouci palace shivering. Shen Chuwei immediately forgot about Yan Yu's provocation. He ate a few pieces of pastries and saw the tiger, lion, and tiger basking in the sun on the grass. There was a large lawn in Sanssouci Palace, which was still green even in autumn. She walked over and sat next to Tigress. Tigress opened his eyes and saw Xiaju, rubbed her head with his furry cheek, and hummed. Shen Chu turned his head slightly and looked at the tigress. I'm not your master Feng Wu, I just look like him. Tigress stared at Xiaoju without blinking, as if wondering why she said what. Shen Chuwei withdrew his gaze and leaned on the tigress's belly. He closed his eyes and fell asleep soon after being warmed by the sun. After Tigress noticed that Xiaoju was asleep, he rested his head on his forelimbs and squinted his eyes in the sunlight. Xiao Jinyan came back from an outing and brought some stinky tofu that Xiaoju loved to eat. However, he searched all over the side hall and could not find Xiaoju. When he saw the little palace maid passing by, he asked, "Where is Princess Juyu?" The little palace maid looked at Xiao Jinyan with a puzzled look. "Master didn't go anywhere." Xiao Jinyan asked again, "I've been looking everywhere, why can't I find it?" The little palace maid reminded, "Why don't you go to the bedroom and look for it? The master may be taking a nap at the moment." Xiao Jinyan had a bad premonition, and fear also came with it. Having experienced it once, experiencing it again will only make you more scared. "I've looked for her, but I haven't seen her." Even Xiao Jinyan didn't notice a trace of panic in his tone. The little palace maid was stunned for a moment when she heard this. "Then I'll go look for you." After saying that, he ran off to find his master. Xiao Jinyan had been with Xiaju for more than 4 years, almost 5 years, and thought he knew her well enough. After this incident, he discovered that he actually didn't really understand her. All he knew was her preferences, but not enough about her temperament. Xiao Jinyan put the stinky tofu in his hand on the stone table aside and continued to look for Xiaju. "Xiaju doesn't know kung fu, so he can only go through the palace gate if he wants to leave the palace, unless Xiaoju is a little clever, so if he wants to get out of the palace by other means, it is possible. Xiao Jinyan had seen how she looked after disguising herself, so it would be feasible if she used this method again to get through. Xiao Jinyan was almost going crazy, but Zhang Xiang, who was sleeping slightly at the beginning, suddenly smelled the fragrance. She shrugged her nose and slowly opened her eyes. Why do you smell the fragrance of stinky tofu? Shen Chuwei sat up with confusion, looked around, then stood up holding the tigress's belly, and walked over smelling the scent of stinky tofu. After walking for a while, the smell of stinky tofu became stronger and stronger. The stinky tofu is nearby. Shen Chuwei walked a few more steps and saw the familiar oil paper bag on the stone table from a distance. Having eaten stinky tofu several times, she recognized it as stinky tofu at a glance. She is the only one who loves stinky tofu in Sanssouci Palace, so it must be bought for her, right? Shen Chuwei thought so and walked over quickly. But before she could reach the stone table, she was hugged into someone's arms so fast that she almost thought they were going to kidnap her. When Xiao Jinyan saw Xiaoju, he ran over to hug her without even thinking. He searched the entire Wu Palace, including Yesu Han's place. He thought she secretly left again without saying goodbye. Where have you been? Shen Chuwei raised his head and looked at him, but he couldn't see his face because of the position he was holding. He could only see his long black hair and the dark back of his head. What's wrong? Xiao Jinyan opened his arms and looked at her intently. I thought you secretly left without saying goodbye again. Shen Chuwei looked confused. I just took a nap. Xiao Jinyan didn't know whether it was fear or nervousness. It always felt like she wanted to leave secretly without saying goodbye because she didn't find a good way and came back again. I've searched all over Sanssouci Palace and I haven't seen you. Are you sure you just slept? I know you're angry, give me some time, okay? Shen Chuwei explained, I'm not angry, I'm really sleeping. Xiao Jinyan stretched out his slender fingers to touch her face, and said stubbornly, Xiaoju, I have never forgotten my promise to you, believe me, okay? Shen Chuwei actually didn't understand the meaning of his words. What was the thing he promised her? What does she want to believe? She thought about it carefully, and it seemed that she had never made any request to Xiao Jinyan or promised her something. As for believing in him, will he not give up on her? Does this have anything to do with not giving up? Her eyes wandered, and finally fell on the stinky tofu on the stone table. She thought that these things would be easier than eating stinky tofu. Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but feel a little anxious when she didn't speak. Xiaoju, we are husband and wife, and we have no doubt about our love. I have never questioned my feelings for you, and I have never thought about hugging you. I just need time now solve some things, understand? Shen Chuwei was stunned for a moment after hearing this. Seeing Xiao Jinyan's handsome face full of seriousness, she blinked her beautiful big eyes twice, pointed at the stinky tofu on the stone table and said, Can I eat the stinky tofu first? Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a moment, then looked back at the stone table. He bought the stinky tofu on it and put it on it casually because he was anxious to find her. He looked back at Shen Chuwei, and he knew she wanted to eat it when he saw her like this. Good. In front of the stone table, Shen Chuwei opened the oil paper bag and found that the stinky tofu was a little cold, but the taste was okay and a little spicy, which she liked to eat. Xiao Jinyan brought 2 new cups of tea, placed one in front of her, and sat down. Shen Chuwei saw Xiao Jinyan, picked up a piece of stinky tofu with no chili sauce on a bamboo skewer and handed it to him. You eat a piece. Xiao Jinyan looked at the stinky tofu in front of him, opened his mouth and took a bite, chewing slowly. The taste was not very spicy. Xiao Jinyan always eats slowly, elegantly, and elegantly. It took him 2 mouths to finish a piece of stinky tofu. Shen Chuwei is different, 1 bite at a time, focusing on pleasure rather than elegance. She loves to see Xiao Jinyan's eating habits and the Imperial Master's eating habits the most. When Shen Shuwei chooses stinky tofu for herself, she always dips it in more chili sauce to make it delicious. I didn't leave secretly without saying goodbye. I was taking a nap, as Tigress can testify. Shen Shuwei was afraid that Xiao Jinyan wouldn't believe it, so he deliberately pulled out the tiger and lion beast from the pillow. What does it have to do with Tigan? Xiao Jinyan asked in confusion. I searched all over Wushao Palace but couldn't find you. Where are you taking a nap? Shen Shuwei pointed to the grass in the distance and said, it's right there. Xiao Jinyan looked in the direction of her finger. There was a large piece of green grass in the distance, with tigers, lions, and sheep lying there lazily. Shen Shuwei ate a piece of stinky tofu and said, I woke up when I smelled the aroma of stinky tofu. Xiao Jinyan secretly breathed a sigh of relief, as long as he didn't leave secretly without saying goodbye. He looked back at Shen Shuwei, saw her taking a bite of a piece of stinky tofu, and reminded, it's a bit salty, drink some tea. Yes. Shen Shu lifted the teacup slightly and brought it to his lips, blew on it, took a few sips of tea, then put down the teacup and continued eating. Xiao Jinyan called out warmly, Xiaju. Shen Shu slightly raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, huh? Xiao Jinyan said, do you really not want to hear about Feng Wu and me? Shen Shu shook his head slightly, I don't want to know. Xiao Jinyan was a little helpless, but he respected her thoughts and wouldn't speak if he didn't want to hear them. Then do you believe me? Shen Shuwei made a gesture of eating stinky tofu. In fact, she didn't want to say this while eating. But Xiao Jinyan brought it up, and she had to respond. She nodded, believe it? What Xiao Jinyan wanted to hear most were these two words, and his eyebrows stretched out, I won't let you down. Shen Shuwei paused after hearing this and continued eating stinky tofu. The Imperial Master had been away from the palace for 3 days. Shen Shuwei was a little afraid that he would come back early, but she also looked forward to his early return. Because the Imperial Master came back, she confessed that she was not Feng Wu but Shen Shuwei. It is also a blessing to have a father as handsome as the Imperial Master. Shen Shuwei really didn't think about leaving secretly without saying goodbye. She gave Xiao Jinyan time to deal with these things, and she didn't know how he would deal with them. He was busy coming in and out every day and didn't know what he was doing. Ever since he agreed to be with Xiao Jinyan, he had thought that one day Xiao Jinyan would become the emperor and there would be countless beauties in the world, just in case he didn't keep it. She also prepared a way out for herself, so the sky wouldn't fall, she would just be sad. After thinking about it, she began to miss Dao Tao and Susu crazily. The two babies couldn't forget her as a mother, otherwise she would really cry to death. Asterisk. Yesuhan was drinking tea when Xiao Jinyan suddenly visited the third prince. Third prince. Yesuhan glanced at Xiao Jinyan and said in a cold voice, is something wrong? Xiao Jinyan walked over with even steps and looked at the silver mask on Yesuhan's cheek. I remember that the third prince didn't wear a mask before. Yesuhan said calmly, I didn't wear it before, but I wore it after Xiaju disappeared. Is there anything wrong with it? Why does the third prince wear a mask? Isn't it because he is afraid that Xiaju will recognize you as Wu Tan? Xiao Jinyan's eyes suddenly turned cold after saying this, you hide it so well. Since a few years ago, Yesuhan had been close to Shen Shuwei as Wu Tan and lived in the palace for a long time. No wonder I didn't like Wu Tan when I first saw him. It turned out that he was Yesuhan. Yesuhan raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, I don't understand what you are talking about. Who is Wu Tan? Xiao Jinyan knew that he would not admit it easily, so he was not in a hurry to let him admit it. Why should the third prince pretend not to know? Xiaju doesn't know that you are Wu Tan yet. What will she think of you if she knows that you are Wu Tan? Yesuhan's tone was still calm, if you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do about it. Today, I'm not here because of this matter. I'm here to ask you. You know what happened when Xiaju disappeared? When we went to the White Horse Temple a few years ago, you recognized Shen Chuwei as Xiaju. I guessed right that you should have investigated Shen Chuwei's life experience, and firmly believed that she was Xiaju, so she should have proof. Can succeed. Third Prince, am I right? Xiao Jinyan went to the inn to look for Wu Tan in the past few days, and found that Wu Tan was gone a long time ago. In addition, Wu Tan and Yesuhan looked exactly the same, and they were from Nanzhao. He had been close to Shen Chuwei since a few years ago, just to confirm Shen Chuwei is Xiaju. He was curious how Yesuhan was sure that Shen Chuwei was Xiaju, or did Yesuhan also know that Shen Chuwei came from modern times? Xiao Jinyan has also sorted out some people and things in the past few days. When Xiaju disappeared, only Yesuhan knew the final process. Yesuhan finished drinking tea and looked up at Xiao Jinyan. You have said so much, what do you really want to say? I want to know the details of Xiaju's disappearance and the proof that Shen Chuwei is Xiaju. Xiao Jinyan always felt that Shen Chuwei was Feng Wu, but he had no evidence, but his intuition told him that he was right. Yesuhan just replied with 4 words coldly, no comment. Then the third prince is not afraid that I will tell Xiaoju that you are Wu Tan? In the future, if you want to use Wu Tan's identity to get close to Xiaoju, I'm afraid it will be impossible. She will hate Wu Tan as much as she hates the third prince. Good night, Spicy. Please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. I wanted to write one more chapter, but unfortunately I didn't write it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 589. This is the only thing Xiao Jinyan can do to threaten Yesuhan. For Yesuhan, after experiencing so many things, Xiao Jinyan understands that it is useless to reason with him, except for threats. While threatening, he also had another layer of temptation. After spending so many years in Nanzhao, his understanding of Yesuhan came from hearing about it and from his own daily contact with him. Just as Xiao Jinyan was expecting, Yesuhan suddenly stood up. He was no less tall than him. They were both princes and they all had an innate aristocratic temperament. I said, I don't know who Wu Tan is, so why don't you tell Xiaju? Don't forget, Xiaju and I met earlier than you, and our relationship has always been very good, but she just forgot. Xiao Jinyan obviously didn't believe what Yesuhan said. If there was no evidence to prove that Yesuhan was Wu Tan, he would not be so arbitrary. Really? Then why do you wear a mask? One day she remembers that the third brother who used to treat her well killed her husband. Do you think your relationship can return to what it was before? When it comes to poking at each other's pain points, Yesuhan and Xiao Jinyan are equally matched, it just depends on who is more ruthless than the other. Xiao Jinyan used to be jealous of why Xiaju and Yesuhan had such a good relationship. Yesuhan was jealous that he knew Xiaoju earlier than Xiao Jinyan, but the person Xiaoju liked was Xiao Jinyan. Yesuhan was startled when he heard this. If Xiaojuruo remembered, would she hate him if she knew he wanted to kill Xiao Jinyan? Yes. Yesuhan hesitated for a moment, and Xiao Jinyan knew that he cared, and it was impossible for him not to care. However, when he was told that he was Wu Tan, the reaction surprised him. For a moment, the two just stared at each other without speaking, as if they were competing with each other. At this time, the border of Nanzhao Kingdom. After driving for days, Su Qingqing looked tired. She had never been far away, so she had seen what it meant to travel across mountains and rivers, and to travel thousands of miles away. Looking at the man next to her, he took good care of her along the way and was happy to be together every day, so the exhaustion of the journey was nothing. Jun Wuxian turned back and looked at Su Qingqing. Even though she was wearing a veil, she could still see her fatigue from her brows. Let's rest in the town tonight. We can enter the capital city before dark tomorrow. Su Qingqing's eyes lit up when she heard that she could enter the city. Does that mean I can meet Shen Shuwei? Jun Wuxian nodded, as long as she's still in the capital city. Su Qingqing said, I'm really looking forward to meeting her. I haven't seen her for a long time. I don't know how she is doing now. Not only Su Qingqing was looking forward to it, Jun Wuxian was also looking forward to meeting Shen Shuwei and wanted to confirm whether she was Xiaju. However, Shen Shuwei has arrived in the capital city. Will he be recognized by the people in the palace? There is no point in thinking about it now. You will know when you enter the capital city tomorrow and go to the palace at night. Although the inns in the town are not as good as those in the capital city, they are still much better than staying out overnight. After dinner, Jun Wuxian asked the waiter to prepare hot water for Su Qingqing to bathe. A rich young lady who has been pampered since she was a child, after a long day's journey, must want to take a bath immediately. Su Qingqing was not surprised, because Jun Wuxian would have thought of this for her along the way. After the hot water was ready, Su Qingqing closed the door, and behind the screen, mist lingered. She slowly took off her coat and stepped into the barrel. Her body was surrounded by warm water, and her aching limbs were relieved. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Ching ching. When Su Qingqing heard Jun Wuxian's voice, she raised her head in confusion and looked in the direction of the door, but she couldn't see it because it was blocked by a screen. What's up? Just to remind you, I'm coming in. Su Qingqing opened her eyes wide, thinking she heard wrongly. What was Jun Wuxian doing here? Along the way, Jun Wuxian always treated him with courtesy, never exceeding even an inch. Why did he suddenly come in while she was bathing? When Su Qingqing was still confused, the door creaked open from the outside, and she subconsciously shrank into the water, keeping her gaze fixed on the screen, for fear that Jun Wuxian would suddenly walk in. Jun Wuxian's slender figure stood in front of the screen, watching the warm mist float out from behind the screen. Even without going in, he knew that she was sitting in the tub at this time. I just went to the drugstore to buy ointment. The best effect is to apply it after bathing. Only then did Su Qingqing remember that she accidentally knocked herself down on the road and had a big bruise on her lower back. She didn't expect Jun Wuxian to still remember it. Put it on the chair. In fact, he admires his self-control and has been holding back without doing anything. Jun Wuxian didn't put down the ointment in his hand, but asked, "Can you see it yourself?" When Su Qingqing heard this, she sat up straight and glanced sideways at her lower back. Her movement was a bit big and the water in the bucket made a splashing sound. She couldn't see the injury on her lower back at all, and applying ointment would definitely not work. She raised her head and looked at the screen, and saw a slender figure printed on the screen, and couldn't help but feel a little nervous. What should we do? Jun Wuxian said, I'll help you. Su Qingqing was stunned for a moment, and when she realized what she was doing, her face was already red. You help me? Well, wait until you get dressed. Su Qingqing stared at the figure on the screen, her heart beating fast in her throat. Was he planning to wait for her to finish washing? Even though they were separated by a screen, they could still see their shadows, as if they were seeing each other. She washed carefully, trying not to make any water noise, but no matter how careful she would still make water noise. Jun Wuxian found something wrong and asked across the screen, Qingqing, are you feeling uncomfortable? Su Qingqing paused in wiping and quickly shook her head, no, I'm not feeling uncomfortable. Jun Wuxian was a little confused, why is there no sound at all? It's no wonder that Jun Wuxian was confused. Everyone who takes a bath knows that it's impossible to have no sound of water. No matter how you wash, there will be constant sound of water. I'm done. Su Ching was so nervous that she simply stopped washing to ease the embarrassment. When she stood up, she brought up a lot of water, and the sound of splashing continued. Su Ching found that she got up a little too quickly, and immediately raised her head to look at the screen. The slender figure on the screen was motionless and was not confused by the sound of water. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After getting out of the bathtub, she picked up a clean towel and wiped her body. From time to time, she looked at the screen. She didn't know if it was her illusion, but she always felt that Jun Wuxian was looking at her. Jun Wuxian stood straight, looking like a gentleman, but his eyes were fixed on the figure on the screen, which was graceful and beautiful. In fact, he admired his self-control. He had been with Su Ching for countless days and nights, and he had always resisted touching her. After Su Ching nervously put on her clothes, she walked out from behind the screen with a red face. When she saw Jun Wuxian, she was still shy even though they were familiar with each other. Asian. Jun Wuxian looked at Su Qingqing's red cheeks, and he coughed twice. Go lie on the bed. Yeah. Su Ching came to the bed, took off her shoes, and lay on the bed, facing the inside of the bed. As long as she couldn't see Jun Wuxian, she wouldn't be embarrassed. Jun Wuxian looked at her actions and smiled and sat down on the bed. Compared with Su Qingqing's embarrassment, Jun Wuxian felt nothing to be embarrassed about. After all, she was his wife, so he saw her. He lifted up Su Qingqing's skirt, revealing a fair waist. He lifted it up a little more, and could clearly see her slim waist. There was a dark purple patch on her fair waist. When Jun Wuxian lifted up her skirt, Su Qingqing's heart was like a fawn, nervous and shy. Because she couldn't see him, her senses were very sharp. Jun Wuxian dipped some ointment with his fingers and applied it evenly to the injured area. His finger technique was very gentle, and he didn't forget to ask, "Does it hurt?" Su Ching shook her head, "No." Her attention was all on the hand on her waist, and she felt strange wherever it touched. Even if it was a little painful, she ignored it. This was probably the first time they had such an intimate action. After Jun Wuxian applied the ointment, he stared at the purple patch for a long time, and then put down his skirt. "It's my fault for not protecting you well, otherwise you wouldn't be hurt." Su Ching sat up and looked at Jun Wuxian. "How can I blame you for this? I accidentally bumped into it. I'll learn from my mistakes and I won't do it again next time." Jun Wuxian stared at Su Qingqing's flushed face for a while. She had just finished bathing and had a faint floral scent on her body, as if she was tempting him. He stretched out his slender fingers and pinched her face. Her cheeks were a little red. "When can you change your habit of blushing?" Su Ching also knew that she would blush all the time, but she couldn't control it. "What's wrong? Don't you like it?" Jun Wuxian smiled and said, "How can I not like a woman's shyness?" Su Ching pouted, "Then you're still blaming me." Jun Wuxian laughed, "Just teasing you." Su Ching raised her head and met a pair of beautiful Rufeng eyes, with emotions in her eyes that she couldn't understand. "You like to laugh at me, just like before." Jun Wuxian didn't say anything, just stared at her. His eyes fell on her lips, and finally couldn't help but lower his head and kiss her lips. It was not the first time they kissed. Su Ching was a little embarrassed at first, but she took the initiative to hug Jun Wuxian's neck while kissing, boldly, and responded like him. Jun Wuxian was trying to restrain himself. He noticed Su Qingqing's bold move and felt that he might not be able to restrain himself at any time, but he was reluctant to let her go. Until the two fell on the bed, Jun Wuxian supported the bed with his hands, looked down at Su Ching with a shy face, and his breath was a little unstable. "I really want to eat you into my stomach in one bite." Su Ching looked at Jun Wuxian without blinking. Although she was shy, she couldn't help but stare at him all the time. "Asian." Rest early. Jun Wuxian got up and walked straight out. Su Qingqing lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. She didn't react for a long time. Thinking of the lingering kiss just now, she almost thought Jun Wuxian would. She covered her face. Jun Wuxian was too bad. Su Qingqing pulled the quilt over her body. She couldn't sleep for a while. What happened just now kept coming to her mind. The next day, because they had to get to the capital before dark, they rode on horseback early in the morning. It was very cold in the morning. Jun Wuxian took out the cloak in advance and wrapped Su Qingqing in it, covering her face as well. Su Qingqing huddled in Jun Wuxian's arms like a little bird. She thought that after what happened last night, she would feel a little embarrassed to meet him in the morning. When they met, they found that, as usual, there was no awkward atmosphere. The horse ran for a day and finally arrived at the capital before dark. Jun Wuxian did not go directly to the palace. Because his father was not there, he didn't want to alarm anyone, so he stayed in the inn directly. While having dinner together, Su Qingqing couldn't help but ask, "When are we going to look for Shen Shuwei?" Jun Wuxian said, "I'll go into the palace first, and then send someone to check." "Don't worry, you will definitely see him." Su Qingqing knew Jun Wuxian's kung fu, and he could enter and exit the palace at will, so she didn't worry about any problems. Yet, Jun Wuxian asked Su Qingqing to rest early, and then asked Chu Zhao to guard the door, and he entered the palace in the dead of night. At this time, Wu Palace was quiet. Jun Wuxian came to Wu Palace as soon as possible. He was so familiar with the route that he could find it with his eyes closed, so he entered Wu Palace easily. Wu Palace in the dark was as quiet as before. With the help of several palace lanterns, you can clearly see the appearance of Wu Palace. Jun Wuxian jumped down from the glazed tiles and looked at the familiar Wu Palace. Since Xiaju disappeared, his father left Wu Palace and no one lived here. So many years have passed, and there is actually no change. The only change is that the trees have grown taller and the grass has grown deeper. He slowly came to the door of Xiaju's bedroom and saw a light on in the bedroom. A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. How could the light be on in an uninhabited bedroom? Could someone move in? This is impossible. No one lives in Wu Palace except his father and Xiaju. Jun Wuxian walked up the steps to the door with doubts, stretched out his hand and pushed the carved wooden door, but it didn't move. Swichuan woke up when he heard the noise, jumped up at the first time, ran to the bed quickly and jumped onto the bed in one go. His limbs were not idle. He jumped in front of Xiaju and stretched out his forelimbs to push her face. Shen Shuwei was sleeping soundly, and was a little unhappy about being disturbed. She closed her eyes and muttered, "Jinyan, stop making trouble." Swichuan shouted unwillingly, as if to remind her that it was Swichuan, not Jinyan. Shen Shuwei opened her eyes under Swichuan's harassment. When she saw Swichuan, she said dissatisfiedly, "Why are you not sleeping in the middle of the night?" At this time, the door of the bedroom was pushed open, and Swichuan looked at the door vigilantly. Shen Shuwei was half awake when she heard the noise. She opened her eyes wide and looked at the door. She didn't have the habit of letting the maid guard the night, so the person who came in couldn't be the maid. Could it be Xiao Jinyan? But Xiao Jinyan said that he would be outside the palace tonight and would not be back until tomorrow morning. Who would come in then? Assassin. Shen Shuwei thought it might be an assassin. She silently took out the broken moon from the space and watched a tall figure walking towards her. The light was too dim to see the other person's appearance, but it could be determined from the figure that it was a man. As long as he dared to do something wrong, don't blame her for using a knife. The shadow walked to the bed without stopping, and bent down to try to do something wrong. Shen Shuwei held the broken moon tightly, and when the other party approached, she attacked the other party's vitals fiercely. September is hot, please support with monthly tickets. Good night. If there are many monthly tickets on the first day, I will add another chapter on the second day. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 590. Jun Wuxian dodged as soon as he sensed danger. Shen Shui's full strength attack was avoided by the opponent, which made him feel a little disappointed. Then he comforted himself that the opponent was too powerful, so he let the opponent dodge, not because she was too stupid. The next second, she turned over from the bed, as flexible as a cat, and was completely different from her usual lazy appearance. Shen Shui looked at the tall figure in front of the bed vigilantly. From the speed of dodging just now, she knew that the opponent knew Kung Fu and could not beat him. She could only get close to him and take him. So the opponent stood still, and she did not move either, responding to changes with the same attitude. Jun Wu did not take the initiative to attack after dodging. When he was not sure who the opponent was, he only defended and did not attack. However, the person who used a fatal attack on him suddenly stopped moving. The two of them were in a stalemate for a while. In terms of patience, no one can compare to Shen Shui. She looked at the black shadow quietly and suddenly thought of Sichuan. Why didn't Sichuan come to help at such a dangerous moment? And the tiger-lion beast, why didn't it howl when a stranger came in? Xiao Jinyan knew to block people when he came, but he didn't know to block strangers. Shen Shui couldn't help complaining in his heart. At this time, a cat's cry suddenly came from the quiet bedroom, which made both of them stunned. Shen Shui looked over and saw the pair of blue eyes in the corner. Finally, he knew to help. Jun Wuxian glanced at the cat in the corner, as if he thought of something, and looked at the person on the bed. You are, Shen Shui. Shen Shui was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that the other party actually knew him. Who are you? Jun Wuxian glanced at the bedroom. People who learn martial arts have better night vision than ordinary people. In addition, he was familiar with this place. He quickly found a candle and lit it. After lighting the two palace lanterns, the bedroom was instantly brighter, and they could see each other's faces. Jun Wuxian recognized the person on the bed as Shen Shui at a glance. He was wearing a middle-aged shirt. He should have been sleeping and was woken up by him. Shen Shui stared at him for a long time before recognizing him, but he forgot his name. I've seen you before. What's your name? Jun Wuxian thought he wasn't the kind of face that could be forgotten at first sight, but Shen Shui forgot it. Jun Wuxian. Oh, so your name is Jun Wuxian, it's a nice name. Shen Shui glared at him again after saying that. Why did you break into my boudoir in the middle of the night? I thought an assassin had come in. Jun Wuxian also felt that his sudden intrusion was a bit inappropriate, but he didn't know that there would be people living here. Fortunately, he came in for a walk, otherwise he wouldn't know that Shen Shui had entered the palace. I just came in to take a look. I didn't expect that there were still people living here, and I didn't expect that you would live here. Do you think the palace is your home? After the danger was resolved, Shen Shui yawned and felt sleepy. Forget it, now I know you know it, can you leave? I'm so sleepy. Jun Wuxian saw that she was yawning and looked very sleepy. If it were normal, he would leave and let her continue to sleep, but now, he had something important to say, and he was afraid that he couldn't wait until tomorrow. I have something to tell you. Shen Shui just wanted to sleep at this moment. Who would talk about things alone with a man they don't know well in the middle of the night? Jumping into the yellow river can't wash it off. What can't be said tomorrow? The world is big, but sleeping is the most important. Besides, men and women should not touch each other. What if my husband misunderstands if men and women are alone in a room in the middle of the night? Jun Wuxian was speechless. It was indeed not appropriate to talk now. After thinking about it, he decided to talk about it tomorrow. It wouldn't hurt to talk about it tomorrow. Then talk about it tomorrow. Come to Yuela in tomorrow. Ching Ching is here too. Ching Ching. Shen Shui's eyes brightened a little, and her tone was full of surprise. Su Qingqing is here too. Jun Wuxian nodded. Well, let's talk about it when we meet tomorrow. Shen Shui was a little excited. She didn't expect to see Su Qingqing here. She hadn't seen her for a long time and still missed her. Then I'll go find her tomorrow. Then you should rest early. Jun Wuxian stared at her for a long time, then turned and left. Before leaving, she did not forget to close the door. Shen Shui lay down on the bed again, thinking that she could see Su Qingqing tomorrow, and fell asleep with the quilt in her arms, somewhat excited. Jun Wuxian returned to the inn, passed by Su Qingqing's room, and found that the light was still on, so he stopped and knocked on the door. After a while, the door opened from the inside, revealing Su Qingqing's scarred face, wearing a green coat, with a few strands of long hair hanging on her chest. It was obvious that she was waiting on purpose. Why haven't you slept yet? Su Qingqing looked at him expectantly. I'm waiting for you. How's it going? Any news about Shen Shui? Jun Wuxian smiled and said, Lucky, I saw her in the palace. I've asked her to come to the inn tomorrow, and you can meet then. Really? Su Qingqing showed a happy expression. I didn't expect it to be so smooth. By the way, why is she in the palace? Does anyone know her? If she is Xiaju, she originally lived in the palace, but I didn't have time to ask. It's the same to ask tomorrow. In fact, Jun Wuxian was also very confused about why Shen Shui was in the palace. And she was living in Wu Palace. He went to the main hall and didn't see his father, so his father should not have returned to the capital. The specific situation can only be told tomorrow. You should rest early. Su Qingqing nodded obediently. Yeah. Wu Palace. Shen Shui woke up early in the morning and wanted to go out of the palace to find Su Qingqing. When she was having breakfast, she looked at the door from time to time to see if Xiao Jinyan had come back. She wanted to wait for Xiao Jinyan to come back before leaving the palace, so that he would not come back and not see her, thinking that she had left without saying goodbye again. But she waited, and she finished her breakfast, but Xiao Jinyan did not come back. Shen Shui wiped her mouth and saw that Xiao Jinyan had not come back yet. After thinking about it, she decided to leave a note for him and then leave the palace. She took out a pen and paper, wrote it quickly, and gave it to the little maid. When Mr. Xiao comes back, give him the note and tell him that I will be back soon. The little maid carefully put away the note. I know, master. Shen Shui then asked the eunuch to prepare the carriage and then left the palace. Yuela Inn. After Su Qingqing had breakfast, she waited at the door, looking at the street from time to time. Jun Wuxian looked at Su Qingqing's actions and felt more excited and expectant than him. I don't know if Shen Shui has lost weight. She's probably lost weight after being out for so long. Su Qingqing sighed. Jun Wuxian looked at Su Qingqing. She had lost a lot of weight compared to when they first met. When he held her in his arms the night before yesterday, she didn't have much flesh on her body. You've lost weight too. Have you? Su Qingqing touched her face. She hadn't paid much attention to it during this period, so she didn't know if she had lost weight. Jun Wuxian said with certainty, yes. Su Qingqing raised her head and looked at Jun Wuxian, and asked curiously, do you like women to be thin or fat? Jun Wuxian looked Su Qingqing up and down. She was so thin that she couldn't hold it in one hand, and her clothes were a little empty. He still liked her when they first met, when she had flesh on her body. It's better to have some flesh on your body. It's comfortable to hug. Su Qingqing blushed, looked around, and found someone looking at her. She said coquettishly, why do you say everything? Let others hear it. Jun Wuxian chuckled, next time, I'll only say it to you. Su Qingqing's face turned redder, but she still nodded. Shen Shui lifted the curtain and glanced outside. She saw the sign of Yuela from a distance and asked the eunuch to stop. After the carriage stopped, Shen Shuwei got off the carriage with the help of the eunuch. You just wait here. Shen Shuwei left after saying that, but was stopped by the eunuch. Master, you must come back. Shen Shuwei looked at the eunuch's worried face and suddenly thought of the last time, when he made him wait for a day. It was probably because he was bitten by a snake once and was afraid of the rope for 10 years. There was a shadow in his heart. Last time was an accident, it won't happen this time, just wait with peace of mind. Shen Chu smiled and patted the eunuch's shoulder, then walked towards Yuela with a cheerful step. When Su Qingqing looked up, she saw Shen Shuwei's figure, and waved to her excitedly and ran over. Wai Wei. It was the first time that Shen Shuwei heard someone call her Wai Wei. When she saw Su Qingqing running towards her, she also waved and smiled to greet her. Qingqing. The two who hadn't seen each other for a long time were so excited. Shen Shuwei looked at Su Qingqing, who had lost a lot of weight, and asked, Why are you here too? I came to see you. Su Qingqing looked Shen Shuwei up and down, and it seemed that she hadn't lost weight. Shen Shuwei had been staying in the palace for a while, either eating or sleeping, and it was good that she didn't gain weight. Shen Shuwei noticed Su Qingqing's face at the beginning. There were 2 scars on each cheek, and the scars were white, indicating that it had been more than 3 months. What's wrong with your face? Su Qingqing touched her face. Jun Wuxian came over, looked at Su Qingqing's face, and said to Shen Shuwei, Let's go in and talk first. Shen Shuwei nodded, Okay. The 3 of them entered Su Qingqing's guest room, and Jun Wuxian asked the waiter to bring tea and snacks. Su Qingqing roughly recounted the process of her disfigurement. Shen Shuwei was so angry just by listening to it, and could also feel Su Qingqing's fear and helplessness at the time. How can there be such a filthy beast? He really doesn't deserve to be a human being. Luckily, Asian came in time, otherwise I would be finished. Su Qingqing looked at Jun Wuxian when she said this, and she was very glad that Jun Wuxian saved her at that time. Asian, Shen Shuwei stared at Su Qingqing and Jun Wuxian suspiciously, with a smirk on her face. You are having an affair. Su Qingqing said shyly, We are engaged and plan to get married at the end of the year. Shen Shuwei asked Su Qingqing before she came out, but they got engaged when they met again? Get married at the end of the year? It's already October, and there are not many days left until the end of the year. It looks like I can drink your wedding wine when I go back. Congratulations on getting a handsome man. Su Qingqing said embarrassedly, Wai Wei. Jun Wuxian. Getting a handsome man? First time hearing it. Shen Shuwei stared at Su Qingqing's cheek again. Maybe because she is a doctor, from the scar, she can guess how cruel the other party is. It can be seen that Jun Wuxian is not a man who covets beauty. It's rare that you have such a good eye. Su Qingqing also felt so, and was a little proud. Asian said, I'm not ugly. Shen Shuwei said, This is called the eyes of the beholder. In Jun Wuxian's eyes, the scar on your face does not exist. Su Qingqing was shy when she heard it, but her eyes were full of smiles. He said so too. Jun Wuxian listened to the 2 people talking, as if he didn't exist. You talk a word, I talk. He picked up the teacup and took 2 sips of tea. Fortunately he was there. If he wasn't there, who knows what they would talk about. Shen Shuwei patted his chest confidently and said, I'll prepare some ointment for you later, and I guarantee you'll get married beautifully. Su Qingqing's eyes lit up when she heard this. Although Jun Wuxian didn't care, women are born to love beauty, and it would be best if the scars could be removed. Do you really have a way to remove the scars on your face? Shen Shuwei nodded confidently, Yes, I guarantee you'll be satisfied. Su Qingqing was so excited when she heard this. Who doesn't want to get married beautifully? It would be a pity to get married with scars. Jun Wuxian saw the happy smile in Su Qingqing's eyes. Although he said he didn't care, the scar on his cheek would still affect Su Kingking's mood and thoughts. It would be best if the scars on his face could be cured. After the two of them had talked for a while, Jun Wuxian spoke. Shen Shuwei, why are you in the palace? Shen Shuwei looked at Jun Wuxian and touched her nose. Well. Jun Wuxian saw that she was hesitant to speak. Why? Can't you say it? Shen Shuwei thought that she had decided to confess after the return of the national teacher, and it seemed that there was nothing she couldn't say. She said in a low voice, because they thought I was Princess Juyo, they took me to live in the palace. In fact, I am not. I am planning to make it clear to them in a few days. Jun Wuxian didn't expect that he guessed half right. He was indeed recognized by the people in the palace. After all, they look very similar. How do you know you're not? Shen Shuwei said, don't I know whether I am or not? Jun Wuxian asked, then do you know that you are not a bastard daughter of the Shen family? Shen Shuwei was stunned for a moment, a little confused. If she is not a bastard daughter, is she an illegitimate daughter? Jun Wuxian. The bastard daughter of the Shen family was raised in the countryside and died of illness at the age of 11. The nanny was afraid that the Shen family would blame her, so she picked up a girl of similar age to pretend to be Shen Shuwei, and then returned to the Shen family in place of Shen Shuwei, so it is very likely that you are Feng Wu. Shen Shuwei was a little surprised. The original owner was not a bastard daughter of the Shen family, but she was not Feng Wu either. Her personality and temperament were too different. But, I'm not. Jun Wuxian couldn't help but get a little anxious. Feng Wu has a pet named Swichuan, and she can communicate with animals. Do you still think you are not? Shen Shuwei explained, Swichuan is not my pet, but Xiao Jinyan's pet. I have the ability to communicate with animals, but that doesn't mean I am Feng Wu. I still know whether I am or not. Shen Shuwei didn't know how to explain. She couldn't just say that she came from the modern era, right? Jun Wuxian saw that she didn't believe him, so he said, it doesn't matter if you don't believe that you are Feng Wu. I have a way to prove that you are Feng Wu. Shen Shuwei was a little curious, what is the way? Babies, please vote for the monthly ticket to climb the list. More updates. Good night. I'm still a little short of the monthly ticket. I'll try to update 2 chapters tomorrow.